Sanchez, and this is the Big Deal podcast for those who don't just want to be rich, but free and do what it actually takes to get there. Okay, today we have a guest I've been wanting to have on since episode 1. He's a billionaire, but he hasn't built just $1 billion company. He's built like 12. Joe Lonsdale, co-founder of Palantir, huge company, started an entirely new university at the University of Austin, created an America First defense VC, 8VC, that is now, I think, $7 or $8 billion under management. They raise about $1 billion every year. He's invested in some companies where we've got a little tiny check right alongside him. He also started Adipar, a fintech company worth $2.7 billion that does $2 trillion worth of transactions. I also invested in that bad boy. He started Cicero Institute, a nonprofit founded with the intention of bettering the country. It's incredible what this institute's doing. I was chatting with Joe afterwards. He thinks that his legacy might actually be Cicero, not everything else he's done, which is cool. So obviously Joe is not afraid to tackle the tough stuff. Homelessness, criminal justice reform, American defense, AI, financial freedom for all. He's got opinions and he's backing them up with action, and I think we can learn a ton from this man who, in a world where nobody is willing to take a stand, in a world where maybe somebody that's 1.1% of the country builds $1 billion business, he's built multiple, and he's doing it all on a mission, not just to make more money, although I think he's got plenty of that, but also to change the world around us. And I'm glad there are humans like him that exist in this world, and I think you're going to like this conversation with Joe Lonsdale. Whether you agree with his politics or not is kind of irrelevant. When somebody has a bigger bank account than you, I always like to learn something from them. Even if I disagree with them, I want to understand how their mind thinks to see if my mind can come up with better ideas in the competition of ideas. And if so, then I bet you can even change the mind of a billionaire. So today, in this episode, we talk about what does it take to build a billion-dollar company? How do you spot top talent and CEOs? How do you get them networked in together? What is wrong with the government today? What about economic policies that sound really great but actually could make us lose all our money and become a bankrupt nation? And what is the fun in being an entrepreneur with lots of zeros behind your name, and how can you affect the world around you? All right, let's get into it. Let's start with some hard questions. I hear that Palantir's name originates from Lord of the Rings. True or false? And are you a Lord of the Rings nerd?
It's true. I have to give Peter the credit for the name, although I also appreciate it. There's a lot of good symbolism in the name, you know.
Yeah, but explain it, because it's from the Seeing Stones. I happen to be a Lord of the Rings nerd, so I'm on your level here.
So in the story, like 2,000 years ago, there's all these bad guys coming into the land, and the elves help craft these like really powerful magical objects to give to the humans to help stop the bad guys, help secure the land. They can like look through them and communicate and coordinate. And it's successful. It stops the invasion. It keeps the land peaceful. It gets rid of the evil orcs. Mm-hmm. And then the problem is, of course, is 2,000 years later, a bad guy captures this, and then he's using it for evil purposes. And so when we were starting the company, we were realizing it's actually really dangerous to create anything really powerful in the world. And there was all these new possibilities of powerful ways you could help the government see the terrorists, find the bad guys, figure out how to stop what's going on, which obviously after 9/11, this seemed really important. It was scary. There was all these bad guys in the world that wanted to attack us. We wanted to help stop them, and we did. But the whole point is you have to build in all these civil liberties frameworks, and you have to watch it carefully, because when you create power, it can be captured and used for evil.
It's interesting, because if you were to explain Palantir, one of your companies, I think sometimes it could be confusing for the every person. Like, what exactly is it? It's data, it's AI, it's all of these words that maybe seem like a bad guy could use it.
Oh yeah, I think maybe a decade after we started the company, there was a James Bond movie where the bad guy was basically building Palantir. I'm like, gosh damn it. It's very easy. It's very easy to turn to the evil thing. But Palantir worked because we worked really closely with a lot of the special forces communities and the teams and people like that who were competent. And we helped go to Iraq. We helped reduce the number of IED deaths and really kind of fix things, make things work. The government was spending billions and billions of dollars, and they'd gotten way behind Silicon Valley. So we thought, what can we do to put something together to help them and help stop the bad guys?
And you obviously have a very storied history, and now how many companies do you think you've actually started?
Well, we built a lot of companies, so definitely at least a couple dozen. But so far, there's only about 8 or 9 that are pretty big.
Yeah, and by pretty big, you mean billion-dollar companies. Yes.
You guys like to be like a billion.
Yeah, exactly. There's just going to be a really clickbaity title
just
with
put
your
like
name
dollar
on it.
signs and just flash the B.
I got your back.
That's kind of my style.
Let me help you with branding. Now, what I think is interesting, though, is I've heard you speak at little small events here and on a bunch of interviews. And despite you building, Palantir, let's call it 67 billion in what market cap, and, 8 VC, 7, 8, $10 billion in assets under management, something like that. Adapar, which we are a tiny little investor in from the beginning too.
Adapar is the biggest number because they have $7 trillion on the platform.
Yeah, under management.
Use a T on that one.
Yeah, I'll put you on a mountain of money. So despite all these things, I've also heard you speak about sort of with this like sense of longing about original building and how like there's something really powerful about a small group of people building together and how that's sort of the foundation of America. Do you think that is still accessible for young people today? Could they build their version of Palantir today?
Yeah, I mean that's the whole point of America is that we build things from scratch, and when something's broken, when something's not working, you build it new. And frankly, America needs a lot of new institutions right now. And the only way to start an institution is to start from something really small and get going. But I would say though, building is not always about building the big things. I think the most important thing about America is just building anything at all, building a small business, building a way to help your community. Most of what works in America is there's like hundreds of thousands or millions of people each building something small. And all together, that's still the majority of our economy. It's the majority of what's really positive. So I don't think it has to be big to be important, but the idea to go out there, to be entrepreneurial and to try to create something, that's a really key part of our country.
And you're still building. I mean, you could have stopped after the 47th company or whatever, but you kept going, and you obviously find like some pretty wild joy in this. You're also not sitting in maybe what's considered a center of power. You're in Texas, right? You could be in DC. You could be maybe in New York or LA if you wanted to control attention or money or, maybe the government in some way, shape, or form. Why do you keep building?
Well, I mean, it's the most important thing in our country is the builders, right? That's like everything else is basically just living off of the fact that there are a lot of people who are helping build and work and create things. Yeah. And it's fun too. And there's, when we build things, we call it venture capital is the investment part, the entrepreneurship's the building part. And in either of those areas, there's really two things that matter a lot. One is what's newly possible now. That's a really fun question. Like what's a new thing you could do thanks to new technology, thanks to the way industries work. And then the other thing is just how do you get the best talent, and just like you would to win a sports championship or have the best football team, like who do you get on the team and help you win? And these are fun problems to work on.
Yeah. You've now invested in what I would assume would be hundreds of CEOs. How do you find top talent? Can you tell almost immediately if somebody's going to win or not?
Alex Karp, who is my co-founder of Palantir, he is this great philosopher and has all these theories of the mind, and he'll meet someone in 2 minutes and he'll know all sorts of things about them. I don't have that magical power, unfortunately, but maybe a tiny bit of the fairy dust rubbed off on me or something. Yeah. But that's not really what I know how to do. We do know how to work with our networks, and we know who's already the best in certain areas. We know how to find people who've done amazing things, in the thousands of companies in our network, and then try to convince them to build things with us. So we do have a great talent network.
So what do you think is your unfair advantage or superpower?
It's a combination of, first of all, optimism and seeing how things can work. So I think most people who I'd consider smart people, that I met at university or in science and engineering, I think their first question is usually why it won't work. And so I think being optimistic is really important. Being good at strategy, where you kind of like really study and understand things, and having strong opinions. Looking at things and saying, okay, this is why this is broken, and I think this is why this is broken. I think you're all wrong, and I'm going to show you why it's broken. But then you have to take that strong opinion. You have to talk to a lot of people, and you have to iterate. So having a strong opinion, but having it loosely held enough that you can kind of make it more accurate and make it better when you continue to work. That's also, I think, a pretty hard thing to do, but it's a learnable skill.
So what is the way that you do that in a company? You've been with some big personalities, obviously Peter Thiel, Alex, Elon, and I imagine you guys all disagree intensely at varying points. Do you have a framework for how to do that in a way that doesn't just end up in emotional distress and, entrenched sides?
Yeah, you definitely have to have debates. You definitely have to talk to a lot of people with whom you disagree. You have to bring in others and learn about things. A lot of people just generally don't have strong opinions. And so when you do have a strong opinion and you see other people who do, it's actually, in some ways that can cause you to fight, but in other ways it causes you to respect the person. Okay, so now let's get to the bottom of this. What do we have to prove to see who's right? and then you go and you prove it, you know.
Interesting. And so if that was to happen between us and I was to say, well, I really strongly believe this, your natural inclination is I'm going to push to find the truth. And it really doesn't cause you much distress to have that conflict, whereas a lot of people do.
Or we can make a bet about it too. It's
Yeah.
kind of fun. I have a few of those going with friends right now.
Is it really? What's the best story about a bet that you've made like that?
I mean, right now, obviously, it was just last night, my friend and I are going back and forth on who's the most dangerous for the country, which presidential candidate, of course, right? And the bet we have is that whether or not if Kamala wins and she wins the Senate, with it decide, does she have new Supreme Court justices or not?
Oh, interesting. So then you can quantify, because it would be hard to determine who's more dangerous, because we'll only have one that wins.
Yeah. So whoever wins, if she wins, if she doesn't add any new justices in the 4 years, assuming she also won the Senate, then he'll win. So
how much money does he win?
Wow, it's a lot of money.
Is it?
I'm very passionate about this right now.
I like that. And so you have a lot of friends, as I've seen, on both sides of the aisle, both Democrats and Republicans.
100%. And this is really important. I think it's crazy that our country has gotten to the point where people are like, I don't want my kids to marry people who think differently, and I want them in my life. And it's like, that's so unhealthy. Yep. And I mean, listen, if someone's like an extreme socialist and they're trying to lead a socialist Marxist revolution, I'm probably not going to get along with them very well. But we live in a pluralist society, and it's really important to work with people who have different views. I bet the majority of the scientists I work with are probably some form of on the left. That's the kind of the culture at the universities. Doesn't mean I don't want to work with the best scientists in the world. And most of the time doesn't mean they don't want to work with me as well. We still can get great things done, and you can save lives. And you can create new medicines you couldn't create otherwise. They need my network and financing and understanding of how to build things, and I need their breakthroughs. So I mean, yeah, you got to work together.
Yeah. Well, we were even talking about this beforehand, that even on, let's call it the right, if that's where you sit, there's division inside of that. And so
there's a huge civil war here in Texas as well on the right. It's a big deal right now.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, the Paxton issue is one issue. It's a huge one in Texas, and some people see it through the lens of Donald Trump's being wrongly persecuted, so he is too, and we shouldn't fight, anyone on our own side. And other people say, well, if you broke the law, did all these things, and then we need to make no room for breaking the law. I need to be honorable, and it's these things. People start going back and forth and fighting over things. They disagree on facts. They disagree on intentions. They disagree on principles, and there's a lot of people who are very angry at each other. And it's complicated for me to be stuck, because I'm like, yeah, I really want to get all these things done that are positive. Let's not fight. But at the same time, so I don't want to fight, and I agree with the really strong policies, but then I also agree the principles are really important. And so it is really complicated how you handle these things.
Yeah. Speaking of which, you had some really interesting tweets on, kind of civil war in a different way. But I liked this one in particular, which was, the truth is that anyone who fights for something real will inevitably be seen as controversial. And, here you're talking about meritocracy, equal justice, capitalism, things that perhaps weren't so controversial before, but are now. I told you beforehand that we had one of the vendors from our podcast actually have pushback against different people coming on the podcast because they thought, I don't agree with this idea. So because of that, I shall not work on it. And instead of having thoughtful disagreement, I'm just going to say, no, I'm out.
I think a lot of young kids are taught that these days, that you're supposed to cancel people. You're not supposed to platform them. You're not supposed to let them chat, it's really sad. I think obviously we should be debating these issues, not just telling people that they should disappear and go away,
Yeah. And so do you ever get scared by putting out really controversial opinions? Does that scare you anymore?
I think scared is the wrong word. I do think there's certain things that are just not worth sometimes debating for how controversial they are versus the positive impact you can have. I mean, there's hundreds of possible things we could talk and debate about. And, if I'm going to go somewhere, maybe it's not worth debating about January 6th and what happened or what didn't happen for a particular crowd, because then you're just not going to get anything else done, because they're just not going to listen to you, because they're going to hate you based on your view. And so there are some things that are so polarizing that when you're trying to get things done in the world, you say yeah, I do think this, but I'm not going to say it. But then there's other things that you say, you know what, this is so important that even if people aren't willing to work with me, I feel like this is so important for our country, that it's my job to put this out. And a lot of people who are successful, they're really cowardly about what they're willing to put out, because it just helps them to keep being more successful by not being polarizing at all. Yep. And therefore their whole life, they're just so careful. And it's a little bit sad, because if you're a billionaire in our country, if you just put out standard kind of moderate left Democratic stuff that goes along with that party, then you're totally fine. And everyone's going to like you and everyone's going to not attack you. And I have a lot of friends who in person are like, Joe, I totally agree with you. This is crazy. Like, I can't believe they're doing this. This is so wrong. But of course I can't say that in public. It would mess up all my fundraising with all these pension funds that are run by Democrats or something like that. So it is a little bit sad, the kind of cowardice we see. You'd think you can make more money. You'd be like Elon and just say what you think. And that's not how 98% of these guys work.
Interesting. What do you say back to them when they say that to you?
I say back to them, I realize that sometimes it helps you get things done. It's a virtue signal and to go along and to not have stress in your life. But this is a really important thing for our country. So let's consider allying on this and pushing this forward. You don't have to like make lots of noise about everything else, but at least take a stand and be bold and save your civilization. Because if no people with resources stand up for our civilization, we're going to lose it.
Yeah. I think that's really important. It's interesting too, because I found, even like I was getting ready this morning and I got my hair and makeup done, as you can tell from all the face paint I have on. And I was talking to the two young women who were doing it. And I was just asking them out of curiosity, how's your business doing? And they both said, well, business has slowed down a lot. And I said, yeah, how much? And they're like 30, 40%. We ascertained that number after we talked through it a few times. And I said, is that normal for this time of year? Also, no. And so I said, well, what do you think's happening? And so we started to kind of talk about the economy in not so many words, right? And explain that maybe we are coming into a recessionary period, and even small things where they were talking about, there's a certain type of hair that has to be done consistently and one that's low maintenance and thus like 3x less expensive. And what was interesting is I was talking to them, I was like, well, do you want, so when you're thinking about this from a political standpoint, does this change your mind on things? And they were saying, well, in one instance, our two biggest costs are overhead, so their lease for their little unit, right? And then also their inventory. And they're like, our prices have gone up massively on inventory. And so I said, well, that's interesting. Why do you think that might be? And so we were like kind of talking about this a little bit. And I was curious your take a little bit, because one of them said, well, it would be nice if they capped prices. If we could have some price caps on things. At which point I had your visceral reaction, and I had to really think it through. How would I explain what that meant? What is your take? And how do you explain to people who might not understand what an esoteric word actually means for their life and their livelihood?
It's really interesting because when you get these kind of policies on the left that ignore how markets work, what I've learned is that there's people in the middle like that who are good people and they didn't study economics and they don't realize they don't work, and we'll talk about why. But then there's also people on the far left who are extreme. And the reason they're doing this is not because they think it's going to work. They're smart enough to know it doesn't work, but this gives them power. And so we should talk about that too, right? So there's really two things going on here. It's really important, most of these dumb policies that are dumb when you look into them. It's not because the people are all that dumb. It actually gives them power. So first of all, why does this not make sense? We've tried this all over the world a lot the last 100 years. This is a classic thing of communists and socialists is let's just make certain goods really cheap. When you make certain goods really cheap, you get scarcity, because if you can't make a profit making the good, you stop making the good. And so the price in the market doesn't reflect like someone like price gouging, right? There's like, if the price is really high, there's a giant market, like there's tons of businesses, someone else could start a competitor and they could do a lower price and that lower price would win. And as long as you have markets, as long as you have free people, you're almost always going to have people bringing the price down to what's a reasonable level. Like a lot of, the supermarket price gouging is the one that's been in the press a lot. Yeah. And a lot of people said, well, the supermarkets are making so much money. They're making like 1.5% margins. And yes, at scale, 1.5% margins is a giant number for Walmart, but it's 1.5%, right? At the end of the day. So you can't lower prices much more and to be profitable. And if you do start setting them, you're going to make them go bankrupt, or you're going to make them not provide certain things. And then, by the way, the prices are going to go even up a lot more. And so basically, I don't know if we have time to go over like what prices mean. If they're signals they're signals to the market of like how the work it takes to get everything else. It's like this complicated thing that exists that lets us deliver goods. It doesn't rip people off. So anyway, there's all these economics. We can read more. You can talk to other people, see it online. But then what's really happening here? Well, if you look at the price gouging law that Kamala Harris and Senator Warren and all these people on the very extreme left were putting forward, it's actually something that applies to about 23,000 big companies. And it would give them a lot of arbitrary power to harass these companies and tell them to do things. And guess what? Think of these, we're talking about these cowardly wealthy people. Think of the cowardly wealthy person at one of those 20,000 companies who doesn't want to be harassed, who wants to be able to keep doing their business. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to be friends with them. They're going to give donations to them. They're going to go to DC and hang out with them. Are they ever going to speak out against them? Of course not, because they speak out against them, then they'd have a price gouging investigation. I was talking to a friend here who's building this like big, I won't say what it is, but some big popular thing for a lot of people here in Austin. And he had the inspectors come, and there was like something they found after looking at everything. They say, it's okay, just donate $100,000 to each of these three groups. And there are three like very progressive left Democrat groups. And then we won't make you like do the millions of dollars in fees and fix it and everything. And this is how it works when you have kind of a more socialist state, is you put lots and lots and lots of rules in, and then you basically selectively enforce them and kind of use that to get power to your side. And so this is where the legislation is really coming from. It's not ever going to fix prices, and everyone smart who studied this understands that, but it would give them an amazing amount of power, and she wants that power to use in our society, which is scary to me.
Fascinating. It reminds me of when I was working in China for a bit, and they talked about how in China they don't have rule of law, they have rule by law. And so, they can have all of these rules that allow people to say, well, if you do this, we can actually use the law as a stick as opposed to protection.
100%. And this is where the regulatory state is terrifying, because once you have, as we do, millions of rules, if someone wants to come after you and fine you for something, they will. If they want to go to attack Elon to punish him for speaking out, they will, and they do. And they do this to a lot of our friends. And this is why you need like a government that's checked. Like the government should be afraid of us, not us of them. They should be afraid if they're bothering people for wrong reasons. People can get together and fire them. Like that's how elections are supposed to work, not some unaccountable mass of people that just harass you. So things have really gotten out of control in this country, and we really need to take back power for the people is I think what a lot of people are realizing.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you on that. Speaking of maybe government ineptitude, but also applied to businesses, you had another tweet that I liked that said, we can't hire the right people. We can't fire almost anyone. Our bureaucracies have been getting steadily dumber, more bloated, more broken for decades, and it's breaking the country. And you were talking a little bit about, the decline of merit-based hiring and the focus on accountability and what it should be. Can you talk about this some more? Do you think that DEI actually helps organizations and society?
Yeah, this is a really important one. It sounds abstract to a lot of people. A lot of people will have their everyday concerns. And they're like, why do you care about this like merit-based hiring? I think that sounds great, but I want to put food on the table and I want to get to work and I want to afford healthcare for my kids. So like, what the heck is this thing? And it's really interesting because in our society today, the government is huge. It spends a ton of money, right? It spends trillions and trillions of dollars, and it's in charge of like putting in more charging stations, putting in more roads and putting in more buses, putting in like everything, right? And you keep seeing recently, it keeps spending tens of billions of dollars on stuff that it's all wasted, or it's all, given to their friends, of course, but it's like 7 charging stations after spending $10 billion, or I think Kamala did like a handful of buses for billions of dollars on something that people don't talk about enough.
Light speedway in California.
Oh yeah, exactly. We have this supposed train in California that's just like given $20 billion to a bunch of basically sketchy lawyers and supposed like minority owned businesses that are run by their friends that aren't actually doing anything. They've built almost nothing, right? For insane amounts of money. It's embarrassing for our country, and our country's becoming a place where we can't build big things. So what's going on? Well, our government didn't always used to be run by stupid people. This is a big deal. It's like, there was this, it's fascinating. The Civil War, this is mid-19th century, the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, back on my wall here, a bunch of things signed by Abraham Lincoln is one of, along with George Washington and others, like I love the early American founders and presidents. And, he made the government a lot bigger. Don't necessarily agree with all of that, but they agreed in 1883 afterwards. They said, you know what? We're making like tens of thousands of hires in our government, but we're just hiring all of our friends because, of course, if you win, you want to hire your friends, reward them for helping you. And it was starting to be a little bit of a mess. And they said, this is not good. So they passed an act in 1883 called the Pendleton Act. The Pendleton Act put in merit-based tests. So in order to run things in government, in order to be in charge of huge budgets, you had to be pretty smart and understand the area. You had to pass the test. And we had those tests for about 100 years. But what happened, and by the way, during those 100 years, we went to the moon, we fought World War I and II, had all sorts of like really hard, complicated, amazing things that the government was involved in. And what happened is in the 1970s, we started to have this very progressive left movement in all of our courts. And they said, wait a second, these tests, are these the right things? And they looked and they said, well, our research does show that doing well on tests makes you good at running the government. But our research also shows that minorities get much lower scores on these tests. So these tests must be racist. And so they decided that we're not going to have any tests anymore in our country. So this was basically a form of DEI. It's like proto-DEI in the late 70s, and it was under Jimmy Carter's administration. And then eventually the courts pushed it and finalized it in the early 80s. So for 45 years, we haven't had merit-based tests in government. At the same time, Jimmy Carter said, we're also not going to be able to fire people. And it really wasn't even him, it was a Democrat Congress. But anyway, they said, basically, if you want to fire someone, here's all these new procedures. And so they made it almost impossible to fire people who are doing a bad job in government. So you can't test them anymore and make sure they're smart. You can't fire the bad ones. What do you think happens? And so all of a sudden, we're spending trillions of dollars by these groups they're not nearly as competent.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that. So you could basically point in a lot of ways, obviously we can't totally tell causation, but to the increase in maybe even amount of government employees. Because now, you see right now, there's some pretty decent job numbers before the most recent one.
They're all just
but
hiring
it's all government employees.
It's so embarrassing. Like, oh, we have amazing job numbers. You just took a bunch more, just spending more and more money on frankly, fake jobs. And I feel badly saying that because there are some people who are working for the government who are great, and there's some people who are trying really hard. But if you just arbitrarily hire more and more and more and more people, it's like that part of the country is not what's actually creating wealth and funding things. Like it all has to be funded by the other part where we're actually building things in the real economy.
Yeah, well, you talk a lot in your businesses and in the government about incentives. And I think one of the most difficult parts about the government is the incentives are perverse, whereas, if you don't spend the entirety of your budget, well, you get it taken away. And so there's actually no focus on profit. There's only focus on continual expense and having continual employees.
It's even worse than that too, because your reputation is like how many people who work for you. So they're all trying to justify, like in my companies, like if it's run well, you're trying to justify how to do something with less expense and fewer resources because there's an incentive for that. In the government, you're trying to justify hiring more people.
So I talk a lot about business buying, and I get a lot of questions about it. One of the most common ones is, where do you find a business to buy? My answer is sad, because the worst deals are oversaturated marketplace sites, but the best deals are off-market or curated deals. Either way, finding a business to buy usually kind of sucks. I think it should suck less, actually. So that's why we invested millions in this company. It's called BizScout, a business buying marketplace full of the best deals for both on and off market businesses. It's brand new, it's built different, and we've got verified buyers. So what does that mean? That means the best sellers that are actually interested in listing will get responses. We've got scout sites, aka at a glance, what's the quick analysis of this deal? We've got off-market data, so you can get all the info you need to do direct outreach efficiently. We've got embedded lending, so you can get your own financing for the business right where you buy it. BizScout is brand new, so go check it out because we're going to be adding so many features over the coming years. And I hope that in the future, with you guys and your feedback, we change the face of Main Street buying and selling and turn a few thousand more people into owners while we do it. Because you're a Big Deal listener, you actually get some goodies. So go to the link in the show notes if you want to see BizScout and if you want to think about buying or selling a small business. So let's talk a little bit about the economy and some changes. So it feels like it's starting to slow down. There's lots of people talking in the ether about, founder mode versus manager mode, about wartime CEO versus peacetime CEO. A lot of this generation has never seen a true recession. They saw maybe a V-shaped downturn during 2020 with COVID, but immediate government spending to fix it. And so they've never lived or worked in a down period. So as somebody who heads multiple companies, what are you telling your companies right now? And how do you think differently in this market versus the last 13 years?
Yeah, I think my take on this is probably not going to be popular with people of either political side. Recessions are actually good to have every once in a while. They clean out a lot of nonsense. What happens is there's a lot of resources being used for things that are not productive in the economy, and you need a censor mechanism. You need certain things to go bankrupt. You need to you obviously don't want a deep recession that lasts for a long time. That's terrible. But at the same time, like in order to have growth be better, it's like in order to have the tree be healthy, you got to prune the stuff that died on it, right? And so if you never prune, then it doesn't do as well. So there's something like that here. So I'm not like scared of a recession. It's not a horrible thing. I think our policymakers are too negative about them. I think it's normal to have cycles where you have recessions. The goal is for them to be short and then to have high growth afterwards. And yeah, exactly. We need to be wartime CEOs. You need to take over and cut things that are necessary. You need to focus on making sure you're default alive, which means you have enough cash coming in to pay for things. And so in a lot of cases, that means cutting back a lot and really focusing on, we call it like, cut all the way to the bone sometimes they call it, and just really focus what you need.
Yeah. Yeah, I was reading some interesting data about, recessions and expansions. And if you can be one of the companies that survives a few of those, you are 3x more profitable, and maybe in some cases have somewhere around 9x more revenue. And so I think there's a really good argument for, if you can make it through this, if you can just survive during a downturn, your ability to thrive on the upturn mathematically looks to be a lot more aggressive.
The way our society does better is it has higher growth overall. And if you want higher growth overall, you want more of the resources going into the really, really well-run companies and not into the ones that are sloppy. And so a recession kind of cuts the sloppy stuff, which is rough because it's rough, but it's actually necessary for a free market economy to work well.
Yeah. Now, with your companies, do you go and talk to them about how to run differently in this environment? Like, are you going and talking to all the 8 VC companies? Do you talk to your capital allocators about how they should invest in companies differently? Does the thesis change depending on the economy?
Yeah, it's been really hard to know when the recession is going to hit because you keep getting these waves of government stimulus just sending out money, and it's kind of so we've been worried for a couple of years that at some point, as a reaction to all this like over stimulus, kind of like being on some kind of drug high, like you have to have a crash. Yeah. And so we've been basically trying to make sure companies take advantage of the money around, raise a lot of money on good terms, have a lot of runway that they can kind of get through it. A lot of our more established companies, things I built like Adapar, for example, which is the wealth management technology company, trying to make sure it gets default cash flow positive. And so even though we're being very aggressive and building a lot of things there, we're also watching it carefully that it doesn't need to raise money. Just because what can happen if there's a recession and if things go bad, there might be a couple of years where it's tougher to raise money on good terms. You don't want to be forced to try to do that.
Yeah. You also, I think, have some interesting takes about existential threats that your companies have faced before. And so was there a time where you were like, oh my God, we're not going to make it. We're running out of cash. Everybody's going to hate me. I'm a terrible founder. And what do I do next? And if so, what happened?
Oh, all sorts of times like that. I mean, early on at Palantir, like a few of the key people were just about to quit in year 3 because it was taking so long to get the government to take us seriously enough and to use it. And we really, it was interesting. I found it happens a lot when you're on the verge of success that people are exhausted and they're about to give up, and you just need to get them to double down for another year, and then you can make it. But that's a common theme with a lot of companies I've seen, where it's like you got to push so hard, you get exhausted, and you got to convince people to have a second wind, and you got to find a way, whatever inspires them. I think in that case, we try to bring in people from MI6, which is the intelligence agency
as
in
one
Britain.
does. Yeah.
This guy Sir Mark is my friend from there. He was number 2 there for decades, and his name's M, which is kind of cool. And he's so you bring in people and you expose them to their problems, and you inspire them with what they're working on matters, and show how it's close. And it's tough because startups are a lot of times like building a bridge to somewhere you're not exactly sure where it's going to, and that's a very scary thing. You have to be a little bit overconfident sometimes to do these things. And so no, I think OpenGov's another one. So we sold OpenGov this year for $1.8 billion, and there were multiple times when we thought OpenGov was failing early on. And Zach's an amazing CEO who helped me start it, but then he came in as full-time CEO a few years in. And we just learned a lot. We built a tool to help governments and help cities and state agencies compare to others and see how they're doing. And it turned out that when the budget turned down, that wasn't a tool they absolutely needed. So it was actually kind of useful at first, but then they saw them stop paying us. We're like, oh, this sucks. We learned that we actually have to build tools that run their everyday processes, and so we had to kind of rejigger and do things that they already had budget for. And then, at one point our engineering team just wasn't strong enough, and I'd been busy. I was a chairman, but I hadn't noticed, and we'd been missing milestones. And crap, so I had to call in favors, bring in all these people, and John Chambers, who built Cisco, which is a very large company. His former CPO Pankaj came in, and helped us hire people. And my CTO Bhaskar. So we'd had all these people we just had to bring in and fix it. And we could have just given up a couple times. It was we're basically out of money. The revenue wasn't going up, didn't look like it was working, realized the team had been demoralized and the best people had left. You're we knew what was happening is Facebook and Google were stealing them for twice the salary, because this is based in California, in Silicon Valley. you're paying people like 250, 300K for good engineers. And it got to a point where the top tech companies were paying like 6, 7, 800K, and they're stealing people away. And like, even if they were sort of loyal, it's just like, Joe, what am I going to tell my wife? Or, what am I going to tell my spouse? In our case, it's like, yeah, I agree. You kind of got to go for the higher paying job. We're not growing. So yeah, we thought we were gone, but Zach really doubled down, really brought in some great people, and we're able to actually make it grow and be successful. But these things are hard.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think the other part too that you mentioned about, in our companies, what I try to push upon them a lot is, look how often these big, huge companies like Facebook and Google lay off massive amounts of their staff.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we see it nonstop.
We need to trim back sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the nice parts, but you would know this better than I mean, our companies, I just sort of have a visceral reaction to hyper growth, inflated salaries to grow, and then you cut 20 to 30% of the workforce because you didn't forward plan that well. And I've never built $1 billion company, so I really have no idea. But one of our I think our differentiators is like, yeah, we're going to grow a little bit slower than other people perhaps, but you're going to probably make less money, but you're going to have less volatility. How have you thought about layoffs in your companies and growth? And how do you think about that?
I usually tell people you're going to have a little bit less salary, but the upside is going to be worth so much when you get there that overall you're going to make a lot more money. I don't think it's ever a good pitch that someone's going to make less money over long term. I think you want people to be part of something that they're going to do really well in if they can. So for me anyway, that's the pitch I usually have. Palantir had very low salaries. Actually when I was working with Peter Thiel, must have been 21 or so, we conducted a study he had me look into of CEO salaries. And so it turned out there were 3 different cohorts. At the time, salaries were lower. This was turning 42 this week, so this is 21 years ago. But it was like, there was one band was like 75K and under. There was like 75K to 120, and there was 120 and above. And the CEOs for startups that were 75K and under, like just massively outperformed the ones that were 120K and above. It was kind of mixed for the middle salaries, but but the low salary CEOs just massively outperformed. And there was something about it was very clear they were there to get upside and not to get paid. Because especially it got even worse when you got even the higher salary, like 200, 300K salary CEO for startups, which is like massive underperformance versus low salary ones. So
that's
interesting,
fascinating.
Right?
Do you think that still holds?
I think the bands would be different today because I think you can't even live on that much money in these expensive areas very well, which is maybe obnoxious to say for people listening in other areas, but these are really expensive areas to live. So you probably need to raise the bands. But yeah, I think it's definitely still a really important indicator. It's not like the main thing for how we invest, obviously, but it's definitely one of like the 10 things you want to check when you're investing in a company early stage is if they're there to pay themselves a huge amount, that's a huge red flag.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and I guess the best CEOs we've ever invested in, they wanted the upside. They were like, no, if you have 2 options and one of those options is much more if we win, I want that.
So what I did at Palantir is we actually ended up putting this in all of our offers is we'd give them 3 offers of different salary and different equity, and then we'd show them, and we have a little caveat down below. It's kind of fun. We'd show them if the company has certain outcomes, what might the equity be worth? So this is really fun. Imagine you're one of Palantir. You'd say well, you can make 60K or 80K or 100K for this position as an engineer, but you get obviously a lot more equity investing over the next 5 years for the 60K. And if the company's worth $1 billion, your shares could be worth 10 million. And if the company's worth $5 billion, your shares could be worth $50 million. And they say, Joe, you shouldn't put $5 billion. That's totally unrealistic.
Jokes on them now.
Isn't that funny? So many people gave me shit for making the table with $5 billion as the high outcome.
Fascinating.
Because it did seem like a lot of money back then.
Yeah, it's still a lot of money. But I think that that's really interesting too, because theoretically, if you were this greedy billionaire capitalist, you'd say, I'll pay you 200K, no problem, no equity. But investing is one of the very few areas in the world where, as opposed to charity, you could invest in somebody and that person could become richer than you based on the capital you invested in them.
Oh, totally. I have people I've backed who have started giant companies who are worth a lot more than me. But frankly, if you're greedier, you want everyone around you to have upside because then they're working harder.
And
also it's just
it's long-term greedy.
It's long-term greedy. And you couldn't. If you want to sleep at night, you need to make this theirs too.
Yeah.
Especially, by the way, if you're doing more than one thing, which is usually a bad idea to do more than one thing. But because I'm in a position where I'm helping start these things and get them going and helping kind of coach them, I want them to feel like their company, not my company. I may have come up with the idea, but you want the people involved to feel like it's now their idea and they've iterated and they've taken it and it's theirs. And it's one of the reasons why I don't always talk about a lot of the other companies I helped start is that I think it'd be demotivating sometimes for some of the CEOs. I think I'd rather they were in the media more because that's good, it's theirs and they own it. And it really is more theirs now, So I think that's a better way to do it.
I like that. How about, how often do you think for a fast growing company, you have to completely redo your executive staff? Like how many people came with you all the way from the beginning from Palantir?
Palantir was unique because we did have 5 or 6 extraordinary individuals who have grown over 21 years.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say came with me because I'm an advisor, but I'm off the train. So, but it's, Alex Karp did call me on Friday when they got into the S&P 500 earlier.
Oh, I saw that. Congratulations. That just happened.
It's a big milestone. It's a big milestone. And so, I'm still very close to him and Stefan, who's my college roommate, is a co-founder, and people like Shyam Sankar and Aki actually have been there the whole time, as have some others. So Palantir is unique in that I think we had just such a strong team that they were able to scale. The vast majority of the time, you are very often upgrading and redoing a lot of the positions. And even Palantir has had to upgrade things and change things. It's not just upgrading people, it's changing your structure. I think this is very important if we're talking about startup world now, is that if you're building something that's scaling, the right way you're going to report to each other and set goals and kind of have a heartbeat of like what everyone's doing and how they're coordinating is going to be totally different with 20 or 30 people than it is with 50 or 60 people than it is with 150 people. And so a really great startup leader will kind of reevaluate these things really every like 6 months even. And sometimes it'll be a whole year and a half, but sometimes you'll have multiple structural changes even in 6 months because you have to if you're growing so fast. And it feels very much like you're doing something wrong. It feels like, everything's broken. This coordination doesn't make any sense. I'm a horrible leader. This is a mess, but let's just try to redo it this way instead. And it's almost like it's supposed to feel that way if you're growing well. It's not, there's no like clean, perfect way for these things to work.
Thanks. This is a therapy session for me mostly. Forget about the podcast. I feel good about life now. This is sort of random, but we were talking before about some people that we both know and have met here, and I was telling how I had some funny interactions with them. And I've noticed maybe in Austin in particular, but it's got to be even more in San Francisco, that a lot of people who are wildly successful are neurodivergent to some degree, on the spectrum.
It's a nice
to
way
another
of putting
degree.
it.
Asperger's as fuck, like whatever you want to say. Like, have you noticed that
I'm
at
pretty
all?
weird, but I think I'm less weird than a lot of my friends.
Yeah, you actually are highly sociable, which I don't think is always the case.
I'm like
for a
right
lot
on
of
the
people in
fuzzy
tech.
line where I can kind of pretend to be sort of normal for the sake of your cameras. That's the goal.
How long
here.
does this last?
You gotta go hide like, a little bit. No, I think in general, people who are entrepreneurs, people who are different, sometimes that's because they don't fit into the other boxes, right? And sometimes that's in a positive way. Sometimes that's in a negative way. You get people who couldn't fit in to get a real job, try to be an entrepreneur, actually just dysfunctional. That's bad too. And so, but yeah, no, people who are different can sometimes do things that other people can't. And so you definitely get a lot of them in the Valley.
Yeah. And do you think that, like throughout your life, you have to have outgrown a ton of people? Like, has there been many points in your life where you've had to leave others behind because of your level of success, or they didn't understand you, they didn't agree with who you had become?
I don't think I lost friends from who I'd become or anything like that. If anything, I've probably been like too loyal sometimes. It's really hard for me to fire a CEO who I've like built something with and sat together with. And I usually want to like get to the point where they're also convinced that it's like the right move for the company. And so it is a really tough thing. I mean, you definitely have things where things don't work out and things have changed in your life. It is a little bit annoying to me, like, because of my level of success, I'll have like these acquaintances I never would have heard from before, like reaching out for things like constantly. Right. And it's like, it wasn't even that social in high school. We had like a little small group of like, I guess, somewhat nerdy friends, and I had other people around, but now all of a sudden, like, everyone like remembers you, and it's like so if anything about it leaving people behind is the people I left behind are no longer wanting to be left behind is kind of how this stuff works, which is whatever, it's fine. And it's like this is just a normal way of things. It is very fun to be in a position where you can help a lot of people. Yeah. and you can do things, you can there's a rare disease somebody's kid has, and there's ways to like do research on it you couldn't otherwise have done before. There's all sorts of cool things you could do being in my position, which is positive. But no, I wouldn't say I'd like lost too many friendships thanks to these things. I do think I'm so busy that sometimes I don't always have time for as many of the old friendships. But some of them, the ones that are really close, those are precious because you can really trust people you've known for 20 years, especially when you're in a position like mine. It's really nice to be able to have little friends you can trust, you know?
Yeah, and that don't really want anything from you.
I mean, everyone wants things from each other, but it's like, I trust them, you know?
Yeah.
I try to convince them to come on like trips and stuff with me and stuff. Maybe I want them to come on a trip more than they want to come, who knows?
Oh, yeah, that's
but it's
true.
fun,
You're
you know?
always like hella skiing somewhere breaking stuff.
I did have ACL surgery. The trip with heli skiing, it's not that dangerous if you don't put the skis on too tight.
I don't know. I feel like a lot of your logic seems reasonable. That one, I don't know about.
Well, also don't fall off a cliff. Those two things.
Minor, really.
We've just got 2 months before my first ever book is out in the world. If you want to pre-order it for yourself or anyone you love, you can do that at the link in the show notes. If you're thinking about buying businesses, if you want to scale small businesses, if you want to own Main Street, it's called Main Street Millionaire. It's for you guys.
You know, these days, lots of people have a lot of negative things to say about billionaires. Billionaires shouldn't exist. Billionaires are bad. Billionaires take from society.
Are they really negative? Is this a jealousy thing or what is it?
I can never ascertain somebody's emotions as to why they do something, but you can just look at what they say on Twitter, let's say, if they're not a bot. And I guess my thought here would be, one, does that ever annoy you? And what's your comment back? Like, how do you explain to people that it's good for society that we allow uncapped upside for all?
Very self-serving arguments here I have to make. Let me tell you why I should be allowed
Why I
to
should
have
be a
more
billionaire?
money. No, gosh.
You give away a lot of it, to be fair.
Of course, like we're starting universities where I have teams in 20 states trying to fix laws that in ways that are nonpartisan that just make things efficient and functional. Listen, I think it's a really interesting question for a free society. Like, do you want all of the money to be run by committees? So right now, first of all, in our society, there are trillions and trillions of dollars, right? Like over the next 10 years, our government's going to spend like probably about 65 to 70 trillion, plus minus 10%. Trillion, right? This is so much money. If you took away all the money from the billionaires, all combined, I think it's like 4 or 5 trillion. So this is a very small amount of money, like relative to like what our institutions are managing right now. And you see our institutions, and you see them when they try to build these things, they light money on fire, right? You literally have, I think, $300 billion a year going to NGOs, which is the non-government organizations. These are mostly nonprofits that are like trying to like do things with progressives, right? And trying to create more activists, and like I think mostly a mess. They're not accountable. You have all sorts of committees that run trillions of dollars in pension funds, that run trillions of dollars for government to give out to things, and the amount of return you get from the relatively small amount of money controlled by the billionaires versus the amount of money controlled by our big institutions, to me, it's just obviously much higher. Like, if anything, I would love for Elon and Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates, and by the way, I don't know how the same politics as some of those guys I just mentioned, especially not Bill Gates. Sucks in the middle right now. We're trying to pull him over. But like,
Kind of seems like he might be open to
he's
it.
becoming a little bit based, right? It's
Yeah,
good. But
work
Bill
out
Gates, for
twice.
example, is like totally different politics than me. I would love for him to spend more money through the Gates Foundation rather than how we're spending it right now, because it's just so much more competent. Even where I disagree with him, it tends to be more competent. So I guess the thing, and then the other thing is, I do believe in the moral principles of freedom and autonomy and being able to create things. I'm not out there like stealing stuff. I'm literally just like building new companies that didn't exist before, taking my small piece of them, investing that in other companies, taking my piece, investing in other ones. So I think and by the way, every time I do it, I pay pretty high taxes already. So I think it's interesting. Like, overall, our society would probably work better with more people with wealth and more people investing. And frankly, that is, by the way, why America is so awesome. America has hundreds of thousands of multimillionaires who are investing in things in their communities, who are building things, and it's that money that tends to actually, when you own something, when something's yours, when something is tied to your family, that just gives you the incentive to make it functional. So I think that's what a free society is. It's a bunch of people who own things, who care about them, who want to make them functional for themselves. Whenever you drive in a city and you see a building that's like dilapidated and broke down and ugly and abandoned, there's a really good chance the government's involved. Because when the government owns something, it's nobody's, so they don't have to make sure it's used, they don't have to make sure it's nice, they don't have to make sure it's worth it. So when you look at Soviet Union in the old days, in East Germany versus the free part in West Germany, the part the government owns is ugly and it's broken, and the plumbing doesn't work in these places, and things have been stripped and no one ever replaced it, and it's falling apart, and it's sad. And what that is that when no one owns stuff, it just breaks. And so the fact that we already have the vast majority of our resources run by government right now, like I think that's the problem, right? And the problem is not this other part, which is smaller, which is which we create and which we build things with. So I think it's a very unfortunate kind of left populist thing to try to focus you on the billionaires over here when there's actually this much bigger, obviously broken part of our society that's really scary. It should be scary to all of us.
Of course. I mean, tragedy of the commons. I've seen it again and again in Latin America. I used to run a business in Argentina, and I remember a young woman, Cristina Fernandez, came up and wanted to be president of that country and came with beautiful commentary and very flowery words. And I think that the path to hell is often paved with good intentions. And they ran us out of the country and nationalized all businesses. And those businesses that used to be producing for a highly resourced country that has in a highly educated country, too, by the way, in Latin America.
That's the amazing part. It's so rich, so educated, but with the wrong ideas, it became very poor.
Destroyed it. Destroyed the country.
It's really sad. Well, I'm a huge fan of Javier Milei, who's in charge there right now.
Yeah.
I know Elon and I both look to him as something we'd love to do more of here in the U.S. as well. As afuera.
Yeah, agree. I really liked that video where he was just throwing away all of the government agencies.
All these departments a lot of them are fake, and they're just doing things to spread their control, not to actually help people. I mean, it's really sad. But if we can go back to the billionaire one more time, because I know this, and then I always find that term to be silly, but I think there's about in America, depending who you ask, there's tens of thousands of people worth more than $100 million. And Kamala Harris is targeting them right now. It's a classic populist policy. She wants to do something called an unrealized gains tax. Yep. And I could forgive people for thinking this might be a good idea, because if you're just like trying to pay for your health care and you have a job and you want to be able to afford things and you see people making all this money and you hear some people aren't paying enough taxes, it's like, let's find another way to tax them and make them pay their fair share. So I think that first cut is like, oh, this is interesting. It sounds like a good idea. Now, let's actually look into this. Unrealized taxes, what does that mean? And so a lot of people who have a lot of money, you have a couple options. One option is you just like go to the beach all the time and you relax and you party and you don't build things because you don't really need to anymore. The other option is that a lot of people who have that kind of money in our country is because they've actually been really good at investing and building. I'm sure some of them got lucky, but a lot of them have done it a lot of times. I've gotten lucky dozens and dozens of times, so maybe it's all luck. But at some point, there's probably some skill from these people, probably some knowledge of how industries work from these people. And so it's actually probably good to encourage them to build. Now, let's say you take one of these people and I'm going to go build something. I want to bring back, so I've built a multi-billion-dollar company with my friends that brings back advanced biomanufacturing to the U.S. So this is helping do like gene therapies and cell therapies and curing all sorts of diseases. It's that we actually, it's making Ozempic as well, actually, which is interesting. But there's all sorts of things. And we're doing it onshore because we don't trust China. Yep. We don't trust other countries to get what we need it. And also creates jobs in America. This is a great thing, right? We want to bring more of these things back. So if you want to start a company like that, what do? We literally we raised $750 million for half the company. We bought some old plants that weren't really being used to their capacity. And we hired a few thousand people and we equipped them and we went off, and then we raised more money at $5 billion valuation. And so imagine starting a company like this and you're starting to produce and you raise another $1 billion at $5 billion valuation. So now on paper, let's just say my senior co-founder, who's a famous guy, Bob Nelson, he's a billionaire in the biotech space. Suddenly his share of that company, let's say it's 20%, suddenly his share is worth $1 billion. Now the company's just hiring people, just getting going. No one's going to buy his share for $1 billion. It's just his share. But suddenly, because he's already worth all this money otherwise, she wants him to have to pay $250 million to the government. So instead of being able to take all this money and scale up our manufacturing, scale up our business, do everything, she wants him to have to sell out, basically, sell to God knows who, because it's, and then have to pay tons and tons of money. Does that make sense? And on top of that, let's say I'm doing this. Let's say I'm doing another advanced manufacturing thing for defense. I want America to be able to defend itself. I am doing that, by the way. As you know, we're building a bunch of stuff for that. And let's say I have a friend who ran the fleet previously and just one of the smartest people there. And we want to give him. He's now retired. We want to give him like a few percent, for this company. And he's been a good investor. There's a few people like that have been good investors on other things. They've just crossed the $100 million threshold. And I say, listen, I want to give you 5% of this new company. It's, you're going to help out a lot. It's at a $500 million valuation. It's going to be $25 million. And he and his wife look at this and say, oh, wait a second. now that Kamala Harris has passed this rule, if we're going to take a $25 million upside in this, illiquid, hopefully help make it much bigger over the next decade, suddenly we'd have to pay $6.25 million, a quarter of that. So suddenly, if we were going to do this, we couldn't all of a sudden, buy this house we were going to buy with our kid. And so, no, of course not. We don't want this illiquid, risky thing that we're going to have to pay all this money on. And so suddenly he's not willing to help that. He's not willing to bring the jobs back here. So what you see in a lot of words, what I'm saying is there's like systems that work certain ways. And if you put bad incentives into the systems, if you try to make people pay money they don't have if they were to build, that actually get less building. And so yes, you need to tax people for money they have, but to tax people with this unrealized tax thing. And by the way, like everyone in the Valley, Democrats, Republicans alike, who understand how things work, they know it's a terrible idea. This is one of those ones that I wonder if she kind of knows it's a terrible idea too. It just sounds good to people. By the way, it would expropriate so many of us. So it's like a communist thing, basically. It's crazy.
Very. Well, and the other part I think that people don't realize is that everything's a slippery slope with the government. So sure, you start with the 100 millionaires, but then you trickle its way down. And that's how all taxes has happened in this country. So if you think that you should be taxed when you go and you give your friend $100 because he's starting a startup and you want to invest some tiny part in his startup, but you are okay with not getting any cash back and having to pay $20 for the eventual potential that you could make money, but probably a higher likelihood that you'll lose it, then you should vote for this policy.
100%. You can invest in a startup early on. Your friend goes and raises a big round of much higher valuation. He says, the company's doing great. We just raised a bunch. Your shares on paper are worth this. And you're like, oh man, I owe all these taxes. It's crazy.
It's crazy.
You should pay no country in the world does this. You should pay taxes on money when you have access to it, not when it's on paper. It's just one of these obvious things. And I think she knows it. I think this is she's just so far left that she's just kind of going along with this kind of fake energy from people, frankly, who, I've talked to a few people, they don't understand this stuff at all. Of course they don't. So it's just, she's just taking advantage of that.
Yeah. We actually went around, Samuel and I, to the University of Texas campus, and we asked a bunch of people, a bunch of students at the business school, if they should be taxed on unrealized capital gains. Yeah. And it was fascinating to see their responses because most of them said yes first. And then I said, can you explain to me what unrealized capital gains are? And they couldn't across the board. And then I explained it, and I said, now what do you think? And they're like, oh yeah, that seems dumb. And so, that's why probably it's important that you built a university, which is like the next thing I wanted to hit on. You basically saw the university system and were like, not only do I not want to fund any of the existing schools that are already out there, but I want to have the excruciating pain of trying to create a new university and get accreditation, which you guys just got, right?
We have the first class.
You have your first class.
The way we have permission to be a university, it took thousands of pages of regulation. The official rule is that you can't actually be fully finished with your first accreditation until you've graduated your first class.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. They basically, and it's very funny because all the trolls online are like, haha, the unaccredited university. I'm like, the rule is that you can't be fully accredited until you graduate your first class. Wow. So, and it's basically a cartel system. They don't want new competition.
Yep.
But, my co-founders and I are very stubborn. So we're going to build a great university despite all the dumb rules trying to stop us. And it's going great. We've had thousands of professors apply, amazing professors. We have from top schools and other places who felt persecuted in many cases by the extremes. These people aren't all on the right, by the way. This is a diversity of perspectives, but it's competent people who, it's really liberal versus illiberal. Liberal in the traditional sense means open to pursuing truth and free speech and not shutting people down, whereas illiberal means they want to censor you. They want to shut you down if you have the wrong views. And a lot of universities, they're very illiberal these days, and that's unacceptable. We need to train our best and brightest young people to actually pursue truth, to actually speak out, to not just virtue signal.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, we're pretty big on online education, but more tactically in the trades and for small business.
That's amazing.
But I do think that so much of the underpinning of society is, history, philosophy, how the founding fathers happened.
You need some class of our leaders in society that study these foundational principles for how our country's supposed to work, and you fight for them. And if we don't train anyone those anymore, we're going to be in trouble, because that's how civilizations prosper, is they have to understand their founding. They have to understand why they work. They have to understand what their core is. And if you lose your core, then you lose a lot.
Yeah, well, it seems there's this trend from the great CEOs and leaders of our time. Sort of they start out as either engineers or executors or doers, and then they end up Naval Ravikant, like philosophers and psychologists.
Philosophy is the highest art in some ways, right? And to understand people, to understand institutions, how do you have massive impact on the world if you don't deeply understand people and institutions. This is Alex Karp was, the star student for one of the greatest living philosophers alive in Habermas in Germany, my co-founder of Palantir. Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Charles Koch is, calls himself the chief philosophy officer. He's a great philosopher. I've interviewed him before and obsessed with how he helps every one of his employees self-actualize. Like he's obviously demonized by some people, but he's extraordinary in terms of applying philosophy. I'd say he's the greatest living applied philosopher of business. He's 89 now. But yeah, these guys who've had success at all these really high levels, the vast majority of them spend time trying to understand philosophy. What
books have impacted your thinking from a philosophical perspective more than any others?
There's no one in particular. David Hume was always a really important influence on me. A lot of the ideas of how he understood how the mind worked and how reason worked really shaped a lot of how we designed Palantir and some of our technology early on. I think a lot of the philosophy of falsifiability is really important. There's, Kant is really confusing. I don't suggest people try to read him without someone to help, but one of the ideas Kant had that I always really loved is that in order to understand something, your brain has to have a model of it. So you actually have to try to build a model of how something might work. Like you're trying to play a game or whatever, like build a model. And then once you have a model, you can iterate on that model. And so a lot of times in business, when I'm trying to look at something, I just don't know how it works. I'll like force myself to try to even just guess how it might work with some kind of model. And then we say, here's why it's wrong. But then you're iterating and you get to the right model. So it's just fascinating to try to understand from some of these philosophers, like how the human mind actually approaches things and then try to apply that.
Interesting. So in business, might a model often be, is this their business model? Is this their organizational chart? Is this, what are the applied business aspects to a philosophical model?
Well, you could say, how does this part of logistics work? What is the incentive of everyone involved? And, who's paying who? Why is this, I'll give you another one. For healthcare, one of the things a lot of people don't understand is, how do people make money as a payer, as an insurance company in healthcare? And it turns out that we've capped the margins for healthcare. It sounds good. You don't want the insurance companies making too much money. But because we've capped the margins and because they make 20%, their incentive is now to make healthcare as expensive as possible, because the more expensive it is, the bigger that 20% is. And you can kind of go around each of the players in the ecosystem and see what their incentives are. And you say, wait a second, everyone wants this thing to be way, way, way more expensive. We've totally screwed up how we regulate this space and how we put it together. There's things like that you kind of can map out and understand.
Interesting. So are you like Queen's Gambit? You're just watching checkerboards in the air, chessboards in the air as you're visualizing models. Are you a visual thinker?
I was the California State chess champion for Codie Sanchez.
So that is you.
Well, I don't know if that's how the brain works, but I do like strategy games.
You're listening to this podcast, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to take a guess that you either own a business, want to own a business, or are generally interested in making money. If that's true, I wanted to share this thing with you. I don't know why I've never talked about it before, but of all small business transactions, somewhere around 60 to 80% use some amount of seller financing to buy a business. Meanwhile, most people don't even know what seller financing is, let alone how to use it. So what is it? Seller finance is when the seller of the business becomes your bank to buy the business. So you get to pay them back for the new business that you own over time using profits from the business. This makes it possible to pay as little as $0 down, or a much smaller percent than with the traditional bank. It's one of the most powerful levers in business buying, yet there's next to no info about it out there. So I went ahead and put everything you need to know about seller financing in one package. If you want to check it out, go to the link in the show notes.
What about when it comes to, so you have some philosophers that you've turned to. If you were a young man today, and you probably have thought about this because you created a university, but if you were a young man today, where would you say you should read these things? You should follow these people. You should think through these in order to create some sort of foundation on which to build a principled, successful life.
Well, there's been a great conversation and debate for the last 1,000 years in the West. And I think that if you want to understand what's going on, you need to understand that. I would look to what the University of Austin is teaching in their courses, right? I would look to, if you want to say, what are the great business leaders reading? I think Charles Koch would say Karl Popper and falsifiability and Polanyi and all sorts of those things. And I think in general, just look to the people you admire in business. A lot of them write a lot these days. A lot of them talk about a lot of these books these days.
You have a newsletter and a podcast.
I do put things out myself as well. I'm actually thinking of doing something on a little bit more about the kind of the fundamental values of liberty and the frameworks behind our civilization and why it works the way it does. I think a lot of people working in AI right now don't understand like the frameworks of liberty and why our civilization works the way it does. And it's very scary because they have these very authoritarian biases if they're not careful. And so I think giving a counterpoint to that's going to be important. We probably should put out more they should be reading. So I'll be doing more of that.
Amazing. Actually, on AI, you've said this is going to be one of the best things ever for humanity. It can make things really inexpensive for poor people and for everyone else. But we've also heard people like Elon Musk say, your buddy, that it could be really bad for society too. What do you think as a broad generalistic stroke about AI today?
So about 9 years ago in California, I used to live in California, here in Texas, which we love, but I had a dinner with, it was actually Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and about 5 other friends about AI. And this is like well before OpenAI. And all of us assumed that AI was going to have a very, very big impact over the next 15 years, but it was just really unclear what the timelines were. And it was funny because even in that dinner, Mark Zuckerberg was definitely on the optimistic side. And Elon was definitely on the pessimistic side of how it could destroy the world. And listen, Elon's obviously not only helped start OpenAI and X, he's also applied it at Tesla, applied it at other places. Like he's using it to do great things. So it's not like he has a simple-minded approach where he's all negative on this.
Right.
But he is obviously very, very worried about the long-term things that could happen with AI. I'm not saying obviously he's like naive or wrong, but it's just so extraordinary over the next 10 or 20 years what AI can be harnessed to build and to accomplish and to create for our civilization. It's like this amazing, very positive tool that I guess I'm more focused on the positives. And I tend to think that as we build it out and as it gets stronger, we can use it to figure out how to stop the negatives. There definitely is some chance many, many years from today that there's something that's like gone exponential in intelligence. I don't think the universe usually works like that, though. I don't think things just usually go exponential intelligence. I think they get better at certain things over time that we use them for to make everyone wealthier, to basically produce things much, much cheaper. And you know, in most cases, I don't think it's going to be like Dune where we have to have like a jihad against the intelligent machines, right? We'll see.
Great movie.
You know.
Don't want to live in it,
Yeah.
though. Yeah, I agree with that.
Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I was with the lady who cleans my house the other day, who's amazing, and she is a first-gen immigrant, and she was talking about how her daughter is teaching her how to use ChatGPT,
cool.
you know, and some of the others, and how she's applying it to her business, and she used it to create a little LLC so that she could hire a few other people to do it.
I love it.
And you know, you could see sort of the immediate effects of she's 40.
It's so fast. You could do it right away. You could talk to it. I mean, it's smart enough to work exactly for people who are older and who are not tech savvy.
Exactly.
It's making the tech stuff more productive. It's making to make everything more productive. We're doing it for healthcare billing. Healthcare billing wastes hundreds of billions of dollars for our country right now. It's just this like thing in the middle, and we're making healthcare billing about 4 times more productive. So, and there's going to be all these areas you just like cut tons of unnecessary expenses out of.
Yeah, so I imagine that, I mean, if you look at the uptake rates of AI just for the everyday American, it's lower than I anticipated. Like, for instance, my parents have never touched it, right? Mm-hmm. So if you were young today, would you be telling people you should be experimenting with AI above everything else? You should be learning philosophy. What would be your core tenets for the youth?
I mean, you got to do things you're passionate about, first of all. Our minds don't really work that well. You're not using your full mind unless you have emotional feelings about something, unless you're like really interested in it. Like, this is one of the things when they scan like the best chess players in the world and they're playing games, they have all sorts of emotions about all these different positions. And it's basically a way for them to like harness even more of their mind. Like when you're passionate about something, you're actually better at it. So for young people, find what you're passionate about. Of course, learn about AI. Of course, explore it. It's fun with little kids too. You can like make pictures. I have my daughters and I will tell the computer different things. We'll make different dragons and princess caves or whatever, you know, and you tell stories. We'll like write a story.
And they're like 4 and 6 and young, right?
4, 6, 7. Yeah, but a 4-year-old can like,
amazing.
4-year-old could describe something she wants to see and we'd tell a story. She could describe some silly thing and we could weave it into the story. And you'd even have it make a story with you back and forth and you could tell it. You know, you have my daughters be characters in a story that we're working on and iterate on it and stuff. It's fun.
I love it. Samuel, you going to do that next? All right. Samuel's a new father. So he's
probably got to wait till they're at least 3 for this to make sense.
She can't feed herself yet, talk or communicate. Okay. Kind of where I want to close out a couple of things. One is, I think think people have beat up this idea quite a bit, but first principles thinking, obviously categorized or created by Peter Thiel, but then you talk about a lot to this day, this idea of getting back to base level. How do you explain that at a very simplistic level, first principles thinking?
Yeah, and Bridgewater, by the way, was all about this as well, which is a very interesting hedge fund, right? It's the biggest hedge fund in the world. But it's really important. You've seen this in lots of areas where you go back and you say, what are our fundamental assumptions? What are we doing here? Like why? Like, what is our firm the best at? Why is there an opportunity here? What are we gonna, like, what's our core capabilities, right? These are really philosophical questions as well as how do you break down the frameworks for who you are and then say, okay, given these are core capabilities, what are the juxtaposed areas? What are the areas next to it that we can go into that are similar? And it's a really good exercise to keep coming back to because it reminds you of things. This is why building a deck is really good for an entrepreneur, even if it's a small business, is you want to put together, here's 10 pages on who I am, what I'm doing, what the goals are, why it's going to be successful. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs say, oh, well, I'm just so smart and fast, and why would I do this stupid thing that's for stupid people? It's not for me. And it's for everyone because everyone needs to get back to the core of like exactly like what and why and who and how. And sometimes those principles you'll notice have actually changed in a way. Maybe you intuitively realize one of them's changed, but you don't really find it until you go back and actually write it down. So it's just such a helpful thing. And, as a founder, I really admire the founders, not just of companies, but, the founders of America as well. And the founders of America were really clear about their principles. Yeah. And we're very, very lucky about that. There's all sorts of debates. There's all sorts of writings from that time. I grew up reading something called the London Magazine, which is the founders of America and the people, writing things in Parliament and everything would write it and argue back and forth even as you have all these primary sources of what was going on. And it was the Enlightenment had kind of just happened over the last 100 years. And it was really a time where people were really focused on principles in society and what's correct. And so it was a great intellectual breeding ground for founding something like America. But I find founders in general who are the best are similar to the American founders, like really debate these things, really come back to them. And it kind of refreshes and renews what you're doing.
Yeah. It also seems like you have to repeat yourself very, very often as a founder. And so
you do, because you need to make sure people understand the vision of what's going on. I remember early on at Palantir, we'd walk around and talk to a bunch of the engineers helping me recruit and what's the mission to you in your words? Why are you excited about it in your words? When you're talking to your smartest friends and we're going to go over to Stanford or MIT or wherever else we're going to go and recruit, like tell me as if I'm one of them. Let's talk about it, let's practice. And it's helpful. You got to do that.
And isn't that how you guys originally were able to recruit a bunch of engineers from top schools who maybe didn't want to work in defense or maybe didn't want to work with this upstart?
Well, so I think the reason we were able to recruit a lot of the best people is we started with a bunch of the best people. So it's very chicken and egg. From the chess world, from the math world, from Stanford Computer Science, from my friends who, were at Caltech and MIT, we had a really strong group to start. And once you have a really strong group, people are like, oh yeah, my smartest friend from Caltech went here, I should go check it out. And then you have to convince them of the mission. When they come and convince them that they're going to be solving these really interesting, hard problems.
Interesting. All right, I want to close out with a few fun ones. Spending money. What are some of the silly ways that you he's like, look at my wall of Lincoln paraphernalia over here to the left.
My wife designed this, but she's not a spendthrift, but she did a great job, I think.
Yeah, she did. Fun. Yeah, I would be shocked if you did this. That would be a fun little aside for you. But I think a lot of times, I don't really like to glorify money for the sake of materialism ever, but I do think when you're young, there's something fun about, hey, I can take my work, I can turn it into this thing, I could buy something in the world. Is there something ridiculous that you spent money on early on?
I think the things that are most ridiculous that I spend a lot of money on, but that are also really cool is like getting laws passed in states that help people. And it's really fun. So I know this is not material, but listen, when I was 16, I bought a BMW, if that's what you're going for, right? When I first made money, the bubble.
I was going to go for which size plane, but fine. We'll go with the BMW.
So it's really cool. So for example, you talked about your passion about vocational stuff. I am too. I think it's really important for a lot of people. The problem is a lot of our vocational schools suck.
Yeah,
what do you do if a state-based vocational school sucks? What if it's being run by people who are incompetent? Let's say there's 20 of these schools in a state. Like what do you do? And so the thing you do actually, because we figured this out, we spent a lot of time on it, is you say, okay, the state is funding all of these. Starting next year, we're going to fund these things in proportion to the average salary of their students coming out.
Brilliant.
And so suddenly they can't game that. So the schools freak out and they're like, what skills do we got to teach our students? What businesses do we got to partner with to get their salaries up? Because you can imagine most board level conversations, they're probably talking about woke shit. Yep. They're probably talking about some nonsense award they're trying to get.
Yeah.
They're probably talking about how to raise the salaries of some people there. Who knows what they're talking about these goddamn boards, right? But if all of a sudden it's like, okay, no, you are being funded based on your students' success.
Yeah.
You know, we've doubled the salaries of some students coming out of these places over a period of 6 or 7 years. So imagine like spending, it's only cost me like a few $100,000 of like lobbyists and lawyers and my team traveling and all this stuff. And we write op-eds for the legislators and get to know the governors. So to pass one of these laws that just like fixes this and like helps tens of thousands of students costs us a few $100,000, which is, that's like so much cooler than any nice car I could buy. You know, I don't know. Cars are cool, but like, it's actually cooler to do something where you know you've helped tens of thousands of people. And to imagine to get to do that like dozens of times, to me, that's pretty cool.
And you get to build the world that you think should exist, which I think is one of the benefits of money.
And you get to make it functional.
Yeah.
You get to make it functional. You get to make it, if we don't fix these people's lives, they're probably going to vote for Kamala Harris's nonsense stuff. If you fix these lives and they're happy and they don't want to tear things down, they want to actually be part of a functional society, then all of a sudden they're not going to vote for the communism. They're not going to vote for ending America. They're going to vote for more of America because they're doing well. So the more we can fix things, the more we keep everyone functional.
Yeah, and I do think like when my team asked me this, they got mad because I didn't have a fun answer on one of the podcasts, and my answer was I like to hire people when I have more cash.
There's like 20 people who work here, so
yeah, you literally have a small army here.
So they help you get things done. Fine. Now the other really fun thing that I bought recently, it's my favorite thing I bought this year by far, is Starlink for my plane.
Oh, that is.
Is that obnoxious?
Not at all.
Because you know, basically when you're taking off and landing, it's still perfect. And like I have Zoom calls that work perfectly well. Like it's great.
Do you just call Elon if it's ever wrong? If anything ever goes sideways?
Usually it'd be like his number 2 because it'd be really mean to bother him. But yeah, it's tempting.
Okay,
it actually works.
I want to end with something a little goofy maybe. But there's so much going on in the world today that feels like a battle of good versus evil to me.
Yeah.
And I know you're very principled. And I don't really know how to phrase this question, but do you think that is there sort of a spiritual warfare going on? Is there a battle for good and evil going on? What do you see? Because you're embedded in governments across the world. You see true evil in war zones with Palantir. And you've been on the front lines here in Austin helping homeless crises all the way to helping us win wars in the Middle East and China.
I think most people in our society, first of all, are not evil. If you disagree with me, I think this is very important. So we definitely have ardent disagreement between good, well-meaning people, and I would start with that. However, I think there is definitely some evil in the world. I think the Islamists, this is not people who are Muslim, but Islamists, the people who are the extreme, are terrifying and evil, and there's so many people full of hate, full of destruction, full of murder and horrible things, and so you get that in the world. I think one of the evils that I see all around me is the nihilism of the successful class, the successful people who are just out for themselves and their families and are too afraid to speak for what they know is right. Our civilization really only works if the people who are the leaders, the people who are successful, the people who are in charge of things, if they're willing to fight for what they know is true and what they know is right. And there's something really poisonous. It's kind of like what black pill people call it, where they say, you know what? Things are so broken anyway. I'm just going to get mine. I'm just going to ignore this. I don't want the trouble. I'm just going to keep making more money or keep doing these other things, but I'm going to have nothing to do with these battles. And they know these battles actually impact millions of people's lives. They know they're going to really, really matter for our world. They know what the right answers are, and they're afraid to engage them, and that drives me crazy.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I agree. I think there's so many people listening to this who are entrepreneurs, who are building something, but say, I don't care about politics. I don't care about what's happening in the world around me.
Politics cares about you, and
exactly.
I think there's hundreds of millions of lives on the line. I think there's all these things in our civilization right now where we have this really cool research going forward that's going to save lives, right? There's all these things that are so functional that I'm just like when I see, I have a relative with this certain disease that's scary, and I say, you know what? As long as our civilization is functional over the next 20 years, we're going to cure this because I know the technology is there. I understand as long as we have the money to invest, as long as we can get people to work on these things. But if our civilization is dysfunctional, if we let people break it, if we let people do what they're doing right now with terrible ideas, whether it's price fixing or unrealized taxes or packing the court and God knows, what else with our country.
Or gays for Gaza. That one really gets me.
I mean, that's just like, these people are very deeply confused. But If you break things, right? If you have whether it's the commies and the Islamists or something else, and you break things and we don't keep kind of going upwards with positive feedback effects, we're not going to solve those things. We're not going to cure that disease from that person. We're not going to have people living positive lives. And frankly, we're going to have people having less children as well. Like, it's a huge problem right now. I think if you make things more functional, like, we can very easily bring down housing costs, get rid of traffic. If our government was at all competent, we literally could get rid of traffic for very cheap compared to all this other money we're spending. You have tunnels everywhere, no traffic. But there's things like this that would let people have more kids. That would let people live, whatever other happier lives they want to live. And I think it really matters. Like, these fights really matter. And I'm very frustrated to see so many people on the sidelines.
Yeah, it's beautiful. American optimist. I so appreciate you being on the pod today, Joe. Thank you. Now you guys get to say you were inside of a billionaire's house with me. Isn't that fun? If you liked this episode, please subscribe and share. Tag me on Instagram, where I reshare everybody who watches the podcast. That is the only way we get the word out in a world in which mainstream media does not want you to get this word out. They'd prefer to feed you a bunch of proverbial lies as opposed to tell you some uncomfortable truths. I'm not that into that here. But the thing that's interesting about today, I was actually not going to say this publicly, and I was debating it with the team. And then I thought, fuck it, my show, right? And here's what happened. So Joe Lonsdale was going to come on the show. And we had a vendor that was working on our podcast. They do some what's called pre-production stuff, like come up with thumbnails or their interesting tidbits on the internet. And this young gentleman reached out like 2 days before the podcast and basically said, hey, due to my moral beliefs, I do not agree with this guest that you're going to have on your podcast. And so I'm not going to work on this podcast, but feel free to send me other podcasts to work on. And I thought about that for a minute. And I thought, man, that is everything that's wrong with our society today. That instead of when you disagree with someone, you try to dig in deeper to understand their perspective and to find mutual truth, you instead want to silence them and you want to be no part of the conversation. So needless to say, we're not continuing with that individual. I believe hugely in the right of free speech and never in shutting down other people's words, especially when I disagree with them, because that is when you are actually supposed to protect free speech. There are trolls of mine all over the internet that say ridiculous things. And I've never once reported that they should be kicked off platform or that they should not be paid attention to. Except if it was something that was violence, I think you have the right to say it. And so I thought I'd bring this up, not to shame this guy, although I disagree with his decision. I respect anybody's beliefs to have whatever beliefs you want. I just think it is the core of what is rotten in our society today, that someone who doesn't even know this individual is going to read a few things that they have written online, probably a few tweets, maybe a few one-off YouTube videos other people did, and say that this man who has done more for the city of Austin that I live in and across the country doesn't have a right to speak. I think today, increasingly, we've got to figure out how to have conversations with our neighbors and realize we have more in common than not and stop vilifying them. And I think Joe Lonsdale said it perfectly on this podcast, which you guys probably heard. He said, I'm friends with people on all sides, and I don't think most people are evil. He actually said the opposite of that. He's like, I think that I don't agree with all of their ideas, but I still talk to them. And in fact, we have to do that. That's part of being in a republic. And so in this episode today, afterwards, Joe and I got some breakfast at his house and we talked with his head of his podcast. And I'm reminded again about why I like talking with guys like him. Because unlike some billionaires who, the Khosla guy, Vinod or whatever his name is. This guy, for instance, he is going out there saying that we should have an open border when he has a private mansion on a beach trying to block public access to the beach for normal people, is in a lawsuit for like 5 or 7 years while trying to say that we should have open borders. That guy's out of touch as a billionaire. But when you go to a guy like Joe Lonsdale, he's still fighting the good fight every day. He's getting kicked in the gut just like the rest of us trying to build a business. He's losing tons of money. He's having wins. He's having losses. It's probably more insulated once you start being able to have your own plane. But I think when you're in the game of business, you get killed all the time, no matter how successful you are. When you're in the game of politics, even more so. And so maybe this episode is a little reminder that we shouldn't villainize each other, and that actually the real villain are not the builders beside us, but the burn it downers or the grabbers that are located in government. Those are the people that we should be fighting back against. All right, if you guys agree with me, Follow along on the Big Deal podcast, and I'll see you next time. Also, if you like this podcast, leave a review. I'm trying to get to 1,000 reviews. We're right around 464, not that anybody's counting at all on the internet. And I read every single one of them. It means the world to me. If you wouldn't mind leaving a review if you like what you listen to.
You're not rich. You will go broke trying to build a perception for yourself so that other people think that you're doing a lot better than you actually are.
You don't need a six-figure salary to become rich. You can change your financial life in 6 months. See, Vivian, too, rewired her brain on Wall Street. Then she built her reputation by calling BS on feel-good money rules and replaced them with data-backed finance systems she learned. I do believe you can think your way to rich in many ways if you know where to look. And today, we'll see if you agree with me by the end of this episode. What other frameworks do you have about saving, investing, or making money that everybody needs to know?
I like to help people calculate their fuck you number. Close your eyes for a second and imagine your perfect year. How much would that 1 year cost you? And at that point, you could tell your boss, fuck you, and quit. Can I also say something that's probably a little controversial?
Yes, please.
So
I think you and I have the same ideas on lattes. So you famously say a $5 latte will not make you broke. What are the habits that secretly keep people broke?
I think it's the idea of just grossly living beyond your means and finding new and creative ways to do it. Let's give an example. Buy now, pay later. Okay? At first, buy now, pay later was actually an incredible service because it provided essentially a line of credit to those who couldn't necessarily get a credit card, who couldn't get a traditional loan. And this is when you were buying a refrigerator or tools for your work or a new laptop that you really needed to do your job. But now you're buy now, pay latering a burrito or Coachella tickets. So you go, you have the thing, and then you still have to pay more installments. I just think that we have to have a real conversation with all of us as a society and say, when is enough? Because we are on this consumerism hamster wheel that is constantly going to tell you that if you don't have XYZ, you aren't special, you aren't important, you're not rich, and you will go broke trying to build a perception for yourself so that other people think that you're doing a lot better than you actually are.
So I saw that the other day. I saw an ad on Instagram, I think I screenshotted it, that was a buy now, pay later for dresses and outfits. Do you think that buy now, pay later now is a way that makes most people broke? Most people should not use buy now, pay later?
I don't, because here's the thing. If you were to use a, buy now, pay later service, Klarna, Afterpay, whatever, and used it perfectly, you could come out unscathed. How many people do you trust to do anything perfectly? I mean, I can't even make microwave mac and cheese properly half the time. I mess up a step or something. I just feel like the risk is too large. The reward is not worth it. If you can't afford it on your own, then you can't afford it. You need to be saving up for it. You need to be budgeting for it. And for me, I think that what they don't tell you is that if you do miss a payment, the consequences are very severe. And there are decently high interest rates on those loans because that's what it is. It's a loan. It's not some fancy payment strategy. It's a loan. In the same way that you would go out and borrow money from a bank and miss a payment, you're going to have the same problem here.
It's so scary, isn't it? It kind of makes me think about
I don't know if we all just complain too much, if it is reality, but do you think it is actually harder to be young in this generation than it was previously? Like, is it harder to be young and feel like you're rich in this generation than previous generations?
Of course. It is not in your head. It is not even, frankly, quote unquote, your fault. However, we have to understand the reality, but then also know what we can do to change it. So the reality is this. The cost of an education is sky high. Your parents could go to college, your grandparents go to college for $45 and a handshake. Now, a private 4-year education is multiple 6 figures. Homes have very literally 10x'd in cost over the past 100 years. Then you've got wage stagnation. That's awesome. The fact that our dollar just does not keep up with the rate of inflation. And just the fact that we have to recognize that we have so many more touch points of temptation, I'll call them, than our parents did. Because in your parents' generation, they had Keeping Up with the Joneses. They would look out their window with their little binoculars and be like, oh my gosh, the Joneses, they got a new station wagon. Or the Joneses, they got a new TV. Great. You can only see as close as your access gets you. You are actually basing your financial reality on someone who you have proximity to. Even if it's the richest person in your neighborhood, it's your neighborhood. But now, with the 2x4 screen in your hand, you literally have unfettered access to levels of wealth that have, frankly, never before been seen. I have no business knowing what the inside of Kim Kardashian's private plane looks like. I have no business knowing what island some royal is renting out for their luxurious wedding. But once you start seeing these things, that becomes an anchor. And you've probably heard of anchoring bias. It's essentially, when you're given a reference point, you immediately think that your answer to another question should be close to that number. So researchers asked a question. It was like, hey, how many countries are in Africa? And these are people who didn't know the answer, but they would essentially incept a number. And based on the number that they would tell these people ahead of asking them that question, their answer would be slightly closer to that number than, there was some sort of statistical significance there. And the problem is when you are anchoring your life against private jet money, against private island money, against vacation every single month money, you don't live in reality. And I think it's also fair to say that you don't need private island money to have a happy life. And that's the difference.
That's such a good point, because mimetic desire, the fact that I don't even know I want something until I see my rich BFF has it.
I'm going to tell you what you want.
Yeah, it is actually wild. And humans, apparently that is the only way that we know to want something or not. But I had never thought about temptation touch points before. And you're right. We are at a level where there is almost no way to escape them. We're here in New York City today. They're everywhere.
Can I tell you something really evil?
Yeah.
So I started my career on Wall Street, but the second part of my career that is talked about a lot less is that I worked at BuzzFeed. And I literally worked in digital media strategy sales. And that is a fancy way of saying I worked with companies to put ads online. So maybe they were custom pop-ups in Flatiron, like in real life, or maybe they were custom joint business ventures. But the lowest and simplest level of an advertising partnership is a standard banner. There are different sizes. You go to any sort of website, a news media site, you'll see a big old banner or a little banner at the top, depending on how their website's formulated. You'll see one on the right-hand side. You'll see one halfway through the article, whatever. And what they do is there are pixels. As you know, every single web page is made up of all of these little colored crystal pixels, so you can actually see stuff, read stuff. But if you go to, I'll just give an example, I don't know, a shoe website, and you're like, oh, I need this pair of heels, but I'm not going to buy them because it's out of budget. That website has put a very sticky pixel. Imagine it's like an Apple AirTag. They just popped it in your pocket. And then when you go and read an article on the Washington Post, or you go to a article on the Wall Street Journal, you're like, wow, these shoes, they're following me around the internet. It must be, a divine intervention. Like, I need to have these shoes. No, babes. I put that pixel on the internet to track you. Like we are literally fighting against so many more forces than our parents had to. And it isn't our fault, but we do have to be smarter. And I think media literacy right now is such a big part of financial literacy, because if you don't think about why someone is incentivized to show you something, you won't know why they bothered to do it in the first place.
God, that's good. I you know what? I know about pixels, but I never think about the fact that, in sales, they famously say you have to have 12 touch points in order to get somebody to sell something. And that used to be hard to get 12 touch points. Now, I go to Nordstrom's, I like shoes, and I'm on 17 websites plus Zuck knows me better than my man.
Yeah.
He's got my Christmas list. So that's actually, it's a really good point, because I think a lot of times everybody's like willpower, discipline. But if the odds are stacked against you, that's pretty hard.
And did you know willpower is actually the only muscle that gets weaker the more you use it? You go to the gym, you do bicep curls, you do squats, I lift heavy. Every week, I can lift a little bit more. Every muscle gets a little bit stronger. The heavier I lift, the more often I do it. Willpower? No. The more times you tempt yourself, the worse your willpower is. That's why in the morning, you're like, yes, I will have a light breakfast. And then at night, you're elbow deep in a bucket of mac and cheese.
That's never happened to me ever. No, of course not.
No, certainly not. Never. Not to us.
No, I was laughing today. I was in a workout in the morning and with a girlfriend, and my team wanted to film some of it. And she was laughing because she's like, you're so much more serious right now in front of this camera. I didn't even realize it, but I guess I fuck around a lot when it's not there. But the point is, like, I don't even want to do the workout all the time. I don't want to be financially responsible all the time. So I guess you have all this inside information, from your time on Wall Street and JP Morgan and in advertising. Let's go back there for a second. Like, tell me what else. Like, what was one of the biggest lies that you found when you were at JP Morgan? Like, what lies are we told right now about finance that we don't even realize?
I will say one of the biggest lies is just that it's rude to talk about money. I cannot tell you the amount of money conversations I heard for the first time in my life sitting on that desk as a 22-year-old with literally negative $4. And it was crazy to me because we're positioned as, hey, if you talk about money, it's gauche. It's very tacky. You shouldn't be doing that. But I would sit there and listen to the traders compare what the private schools that they sent their kids to cost. And I would hear them compare, which mortgage lender gave you a better rate? Pass me that guy's email. And then I would hear them say, hey, on the street, I was on the equities desk. When you trade a certain list of stocks, you are not personally allowed to invest in those companies. It's a conflict of interest, financial disclosures. We would literally have traders be like, man, if I was a betting man, I would put on this trade, but I can't because I work on this pad or like this list. People were literally giving each other ideas that they personally could not benefit from. They would constantly be talking about money. And that was the craziest thing. For people who are in the beginning of their financial journey, the hardest feeling is feeling like you don't have enough money. But once you get to that level, on Wall Street, what I learned is people have a harder time finding opportunities to actually deploy that capital. They're trying to give that money away faster than they can spend it. But you know what? It has to be a good opportunity. It has to earn them something back. It has to be worthwhile or additive for their life. But I really do think there's power in having that conversation.
The inside of the richest rooms, they talk about it all. I mean, when I was at Goldman in finance, they did what was called a club deal. Mm-hmm. And I never knew what a club deal was. And that just meant like, I guess it came from the 19th hole, like the golf course. Yeah. So the clubs where all these dudes would go, they would sit and talk about deals. Hey, I'm going to invest in this real estate thing. You guys want to get in? That's where I learned the first term syndicate. That's when a group of us all get together. And I realized, some of the best deals, they're never for the public. They're only behind closed doors.
That's that friends and family.
Right. And in the beginning, you can't even really have that matter to you because you're in survival mode. Mm-hmm. But I think it's really important to often know what's behind the closed doors that nobody even knows about.
I think it's important to eventually be in the room that it happens, but you have to know that room exists first. Yeah. And I had never seen it. Like, I grew up very much middle class. My parents were both immigrants. I was the first generation kid. Like, we didn't have these conversations at the dinner table. But what I noticed was those conversations were being led by the third generation trader. It's not even that he had money. His dad had money and grandpa had money too. And so it's almost woven into your DNA to be comfortable having these conversations when for the most of us, we're just not born into that.
Do you have a philosophy on old money versus new money?
Absolutely. I think the difference is social capital, and I'll explain. So basically, when I was young, my parents were not consuming content. They were literally just working and trying to survive. And so when I would go to school on the Monday and people would be like, oh my God, the Ravens, they won this week. I'd be like, the Ravens, what is that? Like, I didn't know what the football team was. Or they'd be like, yeah, like my favorite band, like the Beatles. I'd be like, the Beatles? Like, what is that? And it was always like, even as I got older, it was like, have you seen this movie? Like, no, I have not seen that movie. Sorry, my Chinese-speaking parents have not shown me the greatest 100 movies of, our time. Like, I did not have those unspoken things that made you cool. And I thought when I finally got to Wall Street, when I had gotten, that great education and gotten to this private zone, that I was finally in the club. I wasn't even on the same block as the club. And so unfortunately, I learned a lot more lingo there. So when guys would say, yeah, this weekend we're heading out east. East of where? That's code, by the way, for the Hamptons. Or it was something along the lines of, when we ski in Zermatt and we go to Gestad and there's Courchevel. Like, I didn't even know how to spell these words, much less knew where they were. And there was this essentially club, unspoken, that you had to be a part of. Your dad had to have taken you to that ski resort, or your mom's family had to have had the house in Montauk. Like, you were summering there. Summer is a verb, by the way. Never heard it before that.
Me neither.
And for me, I would say now I'm proudly new money, because when I think about all of these little touch points and this if you know, you knows, it feels a little cheap. It feels like you're buying friendship. You're buying access. And what I love about being new money is that I'm tacky. Like, I don't want to stay at the bed and breakfast in, New Hampshire that Papa had a steak in. Like, I don't want to stay there. Like, I want to stay at the newest, nicest place with 1,000 thread count sheets. I want it because I can afford it. I want it not because it's tasteful, not because it's quiet, subtle. I want it because I can have it.
I love that. Very unapologetic. It makes a lot of sense why millions of people follow you on the internet, because I think it's also refreshing. There is this movement to try to be something that you're not. Like, you get money and then become something different. But I do think, to your point on rich people speaking differently, it's really hard to learn the inner workings of a culture if you don't speak the language. Yeah. So if you don't speak the language of the wealthy, well, then it's kind of hard to become wealthy. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost like you have to learn these words, and not just the fancy summering things, but you have to learn the words like we were talking about it before, 2 and 20, LP, GP, like all of these words in finance keep people away. And part of your mission to me that's so important is you seem to constantly, when I see your videos come up, you're like, let me explain what's actually happening here. And I'm going to take it from, MBA at Harvard down to the rest of us who never knew about this. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I would be curious. You had one video I really liked, but even about how do rich people keep money in the family?
Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, listen, rich people's idea of wealth is very us-based. And I'm talking truly wealthy people. It's like, this is an heirloom passed down from grandpa. This is how we're going to make sure that your kids' college is paid for. And learning that is part of the generational wealth. The generational wealth is not just money being passed down. It's me passing down knowledge that I have, that I maybe, if I was the generation to make the money, I had to break my back and learn things the hard way. I don't want that for you, because I want you to be better than me. I want you to be richer than me. And so I think the number one thing that rich people do that regular people don't is that they strategically, financially choreograph their life and how their money lives. So let me explain what that means. Basically, this financial choreography is how your money will move at certain points in your life. Maybe I have a desire to pass money down to my daughter, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to pass this down in a very specific way. You're going to get some money when you choose a school to attend. You're going to get some money when you decide to buy a home. You're going to only get any money if you make sure to sign a prenup. There are certain things that rich people are asking of their heirs so that their fortune is not spoiled, that regular people leave up to chance. And that's the problem. The people in your life, and frankly, you, are the liability. You are the person who has that lowered willpower. You are the person who might not make a smart decision one day just because you had a bad day or because you're tired. But when you choreograph, and I keep saying that, it's like a dance routine. When you choreograph your money in your life, you've taken all the thought out of it because you've waited for a sunny day when you were in the right state of mind to make smart decisions that you know will pay off in the long run.
This is a secret nobody shares. I've done thousands of deals, but until now, I've never shared the most valuable 10% publicly because I want to buy these businesses myself. Then I realized that if you guys buy the businesses, I get to do the deals with you. So this year at Main Street Millionaire Live, it is your chance to see our insider strategies. I'll teach you how we find, buy, and scale a business step by step with the frameworks that I literally use to buy all these businesses. So if you want to go from an aspiring owner to someone actually running a profitable business, join me. I'll give you my blueprint, and maybe we end up doing deals together.
Let's talk prenups. Do you think everybody should get a prenup?
Yes.
What are the details? Why and how would you set up a prenup?
Well, Cody, because if you don't get a prenup that you make yourself, you still get one, and the government gets to write it. And I don't care if you are left, right, center. I do not trust the government to know me and my partner as well as I do. Nobody should know me and my partner as well as me and my partner do. And so I feel like the nasty phrase thrown around prenups is like, oh, you don't trust me? Like, you think this is just we're going to get divorced? No. But like, you buy car insurance, don't you? You buy home insurance. You buy health insurance. You planning on getting into a crash, losing your home, or getting sick? No. This is just a security blanket. It is essentially insurance. And why it's so important to me is because it can be so tailored to your relationship. So I'll tell you what's in my prenup. My partner and I, when we first started dating, he made a lot more money than me. He covered all of our expenses. He was very generous. And ultimately, because he spent so much more of his money and I saved so much more of mine, when we bought our home, we didn't put in 50-50 amounts. But I wanted to make sure that we were still 50-50 on the house because I only had that money because he took care of me. And that's a loving thing to do. So everything going into our relationship that we have, 50-50. All assets, cash, everything, while we're married, 50-50. The only carve-out being the equity and ownership in my business, because if something were to happen, I would not want my ex-husband having any sort of ownership stake or say in how I run Your Rich BFF. And I think this is so powerful because the biggest thing a prenup can do is protect you. Think about if you are a stay-at-home parent. You are making a huge sacrifice in your personal career. You are doing endless unpaid labor that is so critically important to a family. Your family can't run if you don't do that work. But if you are not making a traditional income and you do not have some sort of protection in place, what happens in 10 years when maybe, say, you get cheated on? You're going to walk away with nothing. The only reason your partner was able to go out and work hard and earn that money is because you took care of everything at home. Whatever your prenup says, it should feel just. And I'm not saying equal, I'm saying fair. Because based on what you are bringing in and what you plan on contributing during the life of the marriage, you should have a clear way to divide that.
Yeah, I'm having dinner tonight with James Sexton. Do you know him? I'm obsessed
Divorce
with
lawyer.
James. Yeah,
Love.
we've become buddies. He's close with my husband. They're both like jujitsu guys. But he says the same thing. And it's, once you've pierced the veil of finance, you realize the world of money. Once you pierce through the veil of divorce, same thing. I'm divorced previously and then happily remarried. But it was awful. I mean, it was awful. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever been through. And I lost a ton of money and time and pain and sorrow and whatever because we didn't actually do that. We did not have a prenup. And so I think there's always an exit tax to freedom, but it's such good advice that, again, is not very PC to share. And I'd be curious, let's go non-PC again. You and your husband both work.
Yeah.
I think it's very controversial these days. What should a woman do? What should a man do? I'm sure you get called a power couple too. I never know what to do with that term.
Yeah.
I'm always like, I think we're just both working, which is sort of normal. But what do you think should be the traditional relationship between man and woman in this world of making money and taking control of the house?
I think it's whatever works for you. And I hate to give a wishy-washy answer, but throughout the course of our relationship, things have changed. When we first started dating, I mentioned that he made a lot more money than me. And I had a lot more free time at the beginning because he was in investment banking. So he worked even longer hours than I did. That meant I picked up a little bit more slack at home. That's fine. But eventually we got to parity. That was probably year 5 of our relationship. And then when I started Your Rich BFF and it blew up, and now that I'm the breadwinner, there have been moments where I am busier than him, and I am so grateful to come home and he's like, oh, by the way, I've washed all of your yoga pants, so you don't have to keep wearing the same pair again. That's weird, Vivian. This is day 5. You need to pick a new pair. And so I think things can change throughout the course of your life. But if your partner is not willing to have that conversation, if there's just some default expectation that you will always be doing XYZ forever into perpetuity, it seems like you may not be in the right relationship. There's going to be moments, and there have been moments recently, even now that I'm the breadwinner, where my husband is just swamped. And I know he's swamped. So I make sure when he comes home, dinner is ready, whether I ordered it or I made it. But I need to take care of him. And he needs to take care of me, and we need to take care of ourselves individually for the other person too.
Yeah. Well, it's freeing because I think, these days there's all these gender norms but simultaneously now we're working too. And so, for me, I'm with my husband, we both work together in the business. So it's both of our businesses now. But Lord help me, if I was the one that was always responsible for having to do the cooking and cleaning, of which I'm completely inept. I'm pretty clean, but cooking, absolutely not. That's him. He goes out, he buys the groceries, he loves cooking. He's a total mini chef, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And he gives 0 fucks. He's like, he's so masculine. He's like, I'm not emasculated by this. I don't care. But I think for a lot of people, these gender norms, you kind of get caged in them. And I've seen them happen to my girlfriends who work. And it always hurts my heart a little bit.
Can I also say something that's probably a little controversial?
Yes, please.
When you do something for free, a woman does it. When you get paid to do something, a man does it. So when you cook at home, you're the one who's expected to do it. The wife cleans, the wife cooks. Tell me why there are so many significantly more Michelin-starred male chefs than there are women. Why? Because suddenly it's your little passion project to make glazed pork belly and have an arm tattoo sleeve? Why? Why is that your career? Why does that get to be a thing that you are highly paid for to have your restaurant group? But when mama does it at home, you should be doing that. That's unpaid labor. Lame.
Yeah, it's very weird. But, I do think it's changing. One benefit, I think, I see people, business owners, men and women coming together every single day. I think the problem is you just can't be expected to do both. If I'm working all day, I'm not coming home and then doing all the housework too. That's unhinged.
Well, I think the safe thing to say is that if you want a traditional wife, then you have to be a traditional man. And you want to talk about a wife who cooks and cleans and has a hot meal on the table ready for, because back in the day, we could also all survive off of your one income, and we could still go on vacation twice a year. We had a white picket fence home, a golden retriever named Rover, and our 2 kids could still go to college, and you could pay for all that. If you can go to work and do all that for us, I'm happy. Happy to vacuum the house every day. I'm happy to cook dinner. I'm happy. But if you can't, and all of a sudden, I also got to work all day and come home, I also need a wife. I too would like a wife who would do that for me. But you know what? If you are both making income, if you are both working, you gotta pick up slack together. And what we actually do in my house is we basically like only do the chores that we hate the least. So like my husband, his nightmare is going to a grocery store. I don't know if it's like overstimulating for him, but he's like, I forgot what we were supposed to get. I don't want to be here. My nightmare is doing laundry. And it doesn't bother him. He's like, Viv, it's so easy. You just like throw it in and then you go. The machine does it for you. And I'm like, yes, but this is like now a 4-hour task. I'd rather go do something that's more immediately laborious for a shorter period of time. And so we divvy up our chores based on what we hate least.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah. It's actually really good because normally I might just bitch at my husband about the thing that I want him to do.
Yeah.
Like I'm a countertop freak. I hate a bunch of stuff out.
We could never be married.
Really?
I am disgusting.
Oh my God. I think we always marry the person that triggers us the most.
Yes.
Like it's probably so I can learn patience and that doesn't matter. But I lose it. And so much so that my husband now has a saying he always says to me, he always goes, don't touch my stuff. And I'm like, because I'm like that OCD person behind the husband cleaning it up as he's trying to make a meal. It's unhinged. And so, but I like the idea. Instead of me yelling at him all the time, I just need to take care of it. And so it's like this same thing. It's so good. Okay, what about, I want to talk a little bit about, you talked about things that you hate, and that's how you choose what to do. What if somebody hates budgeting? Mm-hmm. Like, what do you do if you're a person that hates budgeting, but you know you have to save?
It's a reframe. I think budgeting needs to get a new PR team because budgeting, I feel like, is so looked down upon. It's like, budgeting is going to tell me no. Budgeting is the reason I can't do anything. No. Budgeting is the reason you can go out with your girlfriends for drinks and not worry when the bill comes that your card's going to be declined. Budgeting is the reason you can afford to go on that vacation and not be like, is this pina colada going to set me over the edge? Like, budgeting is the reason why you get to have the experiences you want out of your life. And so I think first we got to reframe. But second, if we're going to be practical here, I like a finger to the wind budgeting strategy, which is just the 50-30-20. So your take home pay, 50% of it goes towards needs. I'm talking housing, I'm talking utilities, transportation if you got to use it to get to and from work, basic groceries. 30% goes towards the wants. So this is dining out, entertainment, seeing friends, getting drinks, whatever. And then 20%, I always say, is taking care of future you. And that covers all things like saving, debt, pay down, investing, all of those things. And the hope is that over time, this isn't going to stay 50-30-20 forever. The hope is that, as you make more money, as your investments start generating more income for you, the 50 and the 30 become a smaller proportionate amount of what you are having come in the door. And that 20 can actually become a larger and larger percentage of what your money is used towards.
So like back when you were paycheck living, like if somebody's listening right now and they're like, all right, I'm going to do this. Vivian seems smart. She was on Wall Street. I'm going to listen to her. What would that look like? Like, what did you do when you got a paycheck in order to start saving? What is the step-by-step that someone should do?
Yeah, there was no step-by-step because if there was a step-by-step, it wasn't going to happen. So in New York City, I remember this too so vividly because you get 2 paychecks a month. And I was living paycheck to paycheck my first year working on Wall Street, which is so ridiculous because the rent was so high. My expenses were so high just because it was so expensive to live here. One of the paychecks, immediately I knew was going to rent and then it was gone. But what I would do is in the portal where it's like day one, they sit you down for orientation. They're like, hey, give us all of your information, your bank account, routing number so we can pay you, da-da-da. You give them your checking account. And then you never think about it again, but you can actually go and change that. So if you go into your workplace portal, you can change where your paycheck gets deposited. And what I ultimately had to do was automatically set aside 10% of my every single paycheck to go somewhere else. Yeah. Because when it was out of sight, it was out of mind. And then I was able to say, well, I only have this much left. This is how much I can spend. And so there was no temptation when I knew I didn't have the money. But all the while, my savings account is getting bigger and bigger. And at a certain point, I pivoted from even just saving to investing. And so I think taking all of the willpower, we talked about this, out of it. You don't want to build willpower. You can't. You want to build infrastructure, choreography. Because once you have those dance moves in place, there's no guesswork.
Yeah. It's funny because even in business, we teach the same thing. We have an idea that businesses should be profitable. I know it's shocking, but a lot of times we're business owners and we pay ourselves last, and then we allocate to new things and we're investing in our business, right? Well, most businesses never sell. Most businesses do not have an end date. They just close. So if you think about it that way, you're not paid along the journey at all, then that's really problematic. And so I have the same belief that in business, you should take the first 10% of every dollar that you make and you put that in your bank account, not in your business's bank account, in your bank account. And it's really painful for business owners to do because they're like, I'm going to run out of money. I have to spend all of this.
If you're going to run out of money, you might need to change some parts of your business.
100%. It's just financial discipline as opposed to willpower, which I think is a real differentiator. But let's actually talk about this. So you've got your cash allocation, your cash investment now. I never really knew how much money to keep on the sidelines. So how much is too much cash to have sitting and how much should you have?
I think there's a number of different levers that I think about. So the first lever is typically what you as an individual, your demographic is. If you are single as a Pringle, you are just worried about yourself, you and your pet rock, 3 to 6 months of living expenses in a high yield savings account is usually appropriate. If you're a head of household, you got kids, maybe you're part of a family, 6 to 12 is probably a little bit safer. But now let's talk the levers. If you have a more traditional W-2 job, then you might be able to get away with the lower end of that range because it's probably easier to find replacement work. You're a freelancer? You're going to want a little bit more buffer. So that lever goes that way. But then it's like, finding a entry to mid-level job, there's dozens of them. But if you're more senior in your career, the job hunt might take 2 years before you find the right fit. So you might need to be on the higher end of that range if you are more senior in your career. And so there's all of these different levers, or maybe it's like, hey, one of your children has special needs. That payment to whatever service or whatever sort of private schooling or something cannot stop. You're going to want to be on the higher end of that range. You have to think about your life and where you fall. I like to do the 3 to 6 and 6 to 12 months as a jump off point, but then you need to pull all of your own levers and decide if you need to be on the lower end of that range, the higher end of that range, or maybe even bump above, or where you need to live to feel safe. That money is not for today. That money, essentially what it buys you is time. If you no longer have money coming in the door, how long could you last with your current lifestyle? And that is what the emergency fund actually gets you.
Yeah, what's wild is how few people know that. I mean, we were playing a little game on the internet a couple of weeks ago where we were asking people, what is your hourly rate? Most people actually don't know that. And then what is your monthly expenses? More people know that substantially, but they don't actually realize what is the gap between what you make, what your monthly expenses are, and what your eventual, hey, I need to have 6 or 12 months.
Yeah.
And so this monetary gap is what kills you. And it sort of feels like the more successful, specialized, or skilled you are, the bigger amount of savings you have to have. So it's a really useful reframe. What other thing that I love about you is you're so framework oriented, which makes things easier to remember for people, and me included, because I'm very forgetful. So when you're thinking about personal finance and budgeting, are there other frameworks that you're like, why don't people know this? I need to tell them about it. And obviously they need to follow you for that too. But what other frameworks do you have about saving, investing, or making money that everybody needs to know?
I like to help people calculate their fuck you number.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
I love it.
This is
what
super
does this
fun.
even mean? Okay, fun.
Okay, so if you're driving your car, don't do this. But if you are seated somewhere safe, close your eyes for a second and imagine your perfect year. You get to live where you live. You get to travel wherever you want to travel. Maybe you're helping out, kids. Maybe you have a pet that you want to have. You can have a shopping budget, all of those things. Now ask yourself, realistically, and don't lie, how much would that 1 year cost you? Then we take that number. You can whip out your handy dandy iPhone calculator. You divide that number by 0.04. That is representative of 4%. And the reason we use that is because 4% represents an incredibly conservative return on your investments. So this is what you can decently get right now from a high yield savings account, which is effectively risk-free. So we're pretty confident you can get this return. The number that you get, that you've now just calculated, is what you would want to have invested. And at that point, you could tell your boss, fuck you, and quit. Because your investments would be able to sponsor your lifestyle. And you could have that lifestyle into perpetuity, never eating into that nest egg. Because how much that nest egg would earn you every year would cover your expenses.
So hot. Also, it's a fun game.
It's such a fun game. Do it with your partner. We like to fantasize a little bit. And I'm like, okay, so if I'm living on a private island in Bora Bora, yeah, you can do that. It's fun. But also, it's realistic. Because if you don't know what goal you're trying to go towards, you're just running into the horizon and hoping for the best.
Yeah. And I think it helps you not get so scared about money. Yeah. Because if you can move into the creativity zone, it's way harder to have the scarcity, the, lack zone. So I love that. Maybe that's a fun way to start out the new year.
Yeah.
Even just imagining it and feeling like, it was funny. My husband and I the other day were looking at some of the greats that we follow, like Napoleon, Alexander the Great, Marcus Aurelius, like old school guys. And he came up with an interesting assertion, which is that none of them actually ever hit their goals. Like they had crazy goals. I mean, Napoleon wanted to take over the world.
Yeah.
Marcus Aurelius wanted to revive the Roman Empire. And they never actually hit them. But their goals were so big that where they fell was pretty cool.
Shoot for the moon, land among the stars.
Very true.
Yeah.
Napoleon, genocide and take over the world version.
Crazy.
Small little issue. Okay. I want to talk now about money and relationships in some ways. So let's say, for instance, that you're about to marry somebody. You're really considering it.
Yeah.
What money questions do you always ask somebody before you marry them?
Let's do a little Foursquare. These are the 4 things you need to know. You need to know what you make, what you have, what you owe, and what you spend. So this is going to talk about income. You should know what your partner makes. I think that's a pretty simple one. You should know what assets your partner has, debts, what you owe. You need to know all of those things. And then also just generally what you spend on, because I feel like that is such a representation of who you are as a person. And I think one of the great frustrations I have with finance and relationships is that nearly 50% of couples don't talk about money until they're engaged. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I did. I talked about all of it.
Yeah.
Did you talk about all of it?
I talked about finance with my husband, my now husband, 30 days into our relationship because I moved into a cockroach-infested apartment and I basically needed him to bail me out of it and let me live with him after knowing me for 30 days. Wow. But I had to be straight up, this is how much money I have. This is how much money I make. I don't have any more money. I'm about to break this lease. It's going to cost me $8,000. It was all the savings I had at the time. Please help me. And it was so pathetic. I felt so just weak, small, lonely. And he responded with such warmth and kindness and understanding. And he told me all of his numbers. And this is not to say that we are the perfect couple, but one thing we have never fought about is money.
Is there a number where you think, Lord, if that's what their credit score is and that's how much debt they're in, don't do it? Is there a breaking point?
I don't think that there is a breaking point, but it does make me wonder. Because my question for you is this. If you are a grown adult with a credit score that low or a debt number that high, why haven't you made a plan to fix that? Because if you don't have a plan to improve those things, maybe it doesn't bother you. Maybe you're okay living like that. I'm not. I want to make sure that we can eventually buy a home together, or we can eventually get a family car, or I'd like to go on vacation. God forbid. I want to relax one time ever. But if you are going to legally tie yourself to someone, especially knowing that there are places that are community property states, you might have to assume somebody's debt if they take on a secret credit card while you guys are married. If you already have problems managing your overall financial health, that doesn't bode well for us. And it doesn't bode well for a lot of other things. In the same way that if someone is willing to lie to you about secret credit card debt, they're probably going to lie to you about other things.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard conversations now, easy life later.
Exactly.
And so you can have the hard up front or you can have it later. And Lord, I wish somebody would have told me that. That was ingrained in you, by the way.
by Latina parents or Latino parents, because my mom always told me, she was like, you can't have fun 2 days in a row. So it's like, you could either do your homework today or do your homework tomorrow, and you could go see your friend today or see your friend tomorrow, but you could never see your friend 2 days in a row.
That's amazing. Also such like an Asian mom thing. I feel like it's so good. I want to talk about like, okay, this is a little bit granular, but let's get granular. Beginning of the year. Let's say that your partner does make way more money than you do, or way less. Do you split things 50-50, or how do you have that conversation with your partner about who pays for what?
Yeah, you can split it 50-50 if you want to break up. No, listen, I am someone who doesn't believe in things being equal. They have to be equitable. Because say we're dating and you make $250,000 a year and I make, I don't know, let's call it $80,000 a year. We go and get an apartment together and the rent is, $4,000 a month. That is a huge proportion of my income, right? $80,000 after taxes, you're probably looking at maybe $60,000 if we're lucky. $2,000 a month times 12, $24,000. $24,000 of $60,000 is what? A third? Over a third. $24,000 of $250. Let's say you walk away with $175. Oh, that's weird. That seems to be a much smaller fraction. No, we are not paying a commensurate amount on our rent. Because of that, I am shouldering a larger burden than you are, even though we are paying the same. And the problem with that is, over time, that leads to a lot of resentment, because you know what's going to happen? You're going to pay the rent, and then you're going to go about your merry way. You're going to go to sushi dinner. You're going to be able to go on vacation. You're going to buy nice clothes. I only have $36,000 left that I'm working with. I'm not going out to sushi dinner. So then I'm going to tell you, hey, I don't want to go out to date night. You're going to think I'm a killjoy. I can't afford to go on vacation. So now you have to go by yourself, and I'm just sitting at home like hating you via Instagram. Like, I will build so much resentment towards you because you are living in a completely different universe than me. I think every couple should split things in an equitable fashion. That can be proportional, doesn't have to be. That can be, one partner just says, I'm going to cover it all because you make so much less than me that I want you to save and invest your money. A great example of this, Tyler Cameron actually told me that he was paying a lot of expenses and bought his girlfriend a new car because she got into a really scary car accident. And when he told me all of that, he made a comment. He was like, yeah, that's probably not great financial advice. And I was like, well, actually, I think it is great. Because if you really think that you are going to have a deep relationship with this person, you want to take care of them and do right by them. And if you're making meaningfully more money and it's no problem to you, why not set your partner up for financial success so that when, hopefully things do progress down the line, you're both in a healthy financial state?
Yeah, it's fascinating, because I think this conversation will help if you're struggling with it. This is such a mathematical way to explain how to split things. And oftentimes we don't talk about it. Then if you do talk about it, you talk about it generally like, well, I feel like I can't pay for all of this. That's not a very useful way to have a conversation. If instead you could say, well, here's a way we could do it proportionally. Here's why I think it makes sense. It's kind of like a masterclass. So if I was struggling with how to do something with my partner, I would use your words.
And it's so crazy too, because when it's things that are not money, it's never this challenging. So when my husband and I order a pizza, we do not split this pizza down the middle. I know for a fact that he is probably, 60 pounds heavier than me. He naturally is going to need more calories to feel full. He's taller than me. He's bigger than me. So yeah, if I give him an extra slice, I don't feel jilted, right? That's my allocation of pizza. You would never feel that way.
Nope.
But when it comes to dollars, all of a sudden people they get their pants in a bunch. Yeah. And I think if we think about money as care, people become a lot less sensitive to it.
Yeah.
You also make money fun. Like the name of your new book is Well Endowed. And I LOL'd when you first gave me a copy of the book because, when money is either a game or mathematical or fun, it's just easier to talk about. There's some emotional burden that comes off of talking about money. So I want you to talk about it because I think this book is important for people. What is in Well Endowed? What are they going to get out of it? Why do people need to read it?
Yeah. So I think it'll make a lot of sense when I explain the title. Even though being well endowed is like a general crass joke that we make, if you actually look at the phrase well endowed, it is in reference to an endowment. And you've probably heard this word before. You've heard of Harvard's endowment, or maybe a big donor gave your favorite charity a pot of money to use, and now the charity has an endowment. What does an endowment actually mean and what does it do? It is essentially resources and funds that allow an organization to further its mission into perpetuity for the rest of time and achieve their goals. That is exactly what I want to do with every individual person. Because oftentimes I feel like our generation is spending money on shit that we don't actually want to impress people we don't actually like with money we don't have. And so you end up looking at yourself one day, you wake up one day and you're like, I hate my job. I don't have anything to show for all of those years of work. And my life really didn't pan out the way that I wanted it to. And so what this book teaches you to do is 1, understand consumerism. 2, navigate some of the biggest deals of your life, whether it's buying a home or a car or insurance. Learning how to actually navigate finances with a partner. How to maybe set your kids up for financial success. Get to your happily ever retirement. And then still be able to build an estate plan to leave something behind on this earth once you're gone, whether it's for Fluffy, your favorite pet dog, whether it's for your 2.5 kids, whether it's for your partner, whether it's for the rest of your family. I want you to feel like you got the most out of this life and we're still able to pass something on.
Oh, that's so good. I know what I'm going to do with my first $20 here, which is I'm going to spend it on this book. But let's say that somebody listening is like, they have $10K.
Yeah.
They have $10K to allocate. It is their, investment money or whatever. What do you think somebody should do besides buy the book with your first $10,000?
First and foremost, nearly half of the country has it. So what we're doing is we're paying off our high interest rate debt. And that is, my friends, credit cards. We are getting rid of that debt. The reason why credit cards can become so nefarious is because the APR on them is so high, usually somewhere between 20 to 30%, meaning that debt is compounding fast. So
APR meaning the interest rate.
Yes, APR being the interest rate every year. You want to make sure you wipe that because that debt can grow faster than the vast majority of investments that you can even make. Once you have that in a good spot, I want you to think about different time horizons. So maybe you want to have really long-term investments. Those are the ones for retirement. Perhaps it's something simple as putting your money into a target date retirement fund. All you have to do is calculate the year where you turn 65, round to the nearest year ending in 5 or 0, and then just picking, Vanguard, target date retirement fund, and then the year that you just calculated. Perhaps then you've got some shorter time goals. And maybe that's, I need to think about investing in a 529 because I want my son to be able to go to school and I'd like to help with that. Not only do you get a state tax benefit for you in 30 plus states, but also that money grows tax-free, can be used for educational expenses tax-free. If your kid ends up being some sort of football star and doesn't need the money, you can roll up to $35,000 of it into a Roth IRA for kiddo. And frankly, if you still have money left over, you can change the beneficiary of that account multiple times. You can become the beneficiary. Mama wants to take classes at the Culinary Institute. I'm going to go get my golf swing right at the Golf Academy. You do have to go somewhere that's accredited. It can't be like Uncle Tony's Golf Academy. It has to be like a legitimate place. But there's so many things that you can do, and it's a little bit of a near time horizon. And 3, I think look into creative ways to invest. We just had an incredible conversation about deal making, buying boring businesses, but also thinking about investing in your short term. So it's like, okay, well, I don't love my job. Like, what am I going to do to get a better one? Maybe it's I have to go get that sort of MBA if I'm in consulting and I need to move up that ladder, because at a certain point, those 3 letters are going to make a difference in certain industries. Not all of them, but some of them. Maybe it's, man, I'd really like this specific skill set. Maybe I can find a place that can teach me how to do that, whether it's design, whether it's, understanding editing. It's all of these things. Invest in yourself for the short term. Because yes, I always say you can start with $5, you can start with $10. Investing is easy, yes. But the more money you have invested, the stronger it becomes. It's very literally a snowball rolling down a hill. And so at the beginning, it actually even makes more sense to invest in yourself so that you can have more money coming in the door. And when you have more dollars coming in the door, you have more money to put towards those longer term investments.
Do you believe in passive income? Do you think that's real?
I do, but I don't think it's as described on the internet. Like, objects in mirror are better than they appear. So, you hear people talk about like, oh, like you can just buy foreclosed home. Shut up. That is not passive. You are doing a lot of steps. You're doing a lot of work. You're probably going to have to do some sort of fixing on the house. That's not passive. You got to do stuff. Then there's like, oh, you can just be an Amazon dropshipper. Do you know how much crap inventory is going to be at your house that you're going to be like sending out, like whatever? Like they're like, oh, you can just drop it, ship it straight from the factory. And then you're like, you got to pay the factory. And then there's like so many 1,000 things that are wrong. And it's also like, oh, well, you can be an affiliate marketer. So do you understand that affiliate marketing only works if you already have a large audience? Volume. And so there's so many things that are positioned as passive income that I think are crummy ideas, not because they don't work, but because they're not passive. They are active income. You have a job, you're doing work. The only, I think, truly passive income strategy, the only, is ownership. You have to own something, whether that be a business that is making you money, whether that be investments in the stock market, whether that be a bond that is paying you interest for having borrowed your money. You have to own something.
Yeah. It's so true. I got ridiculed on the internet once because I said, well, recently I've said there's no such thing as passive income, except it is actually a tax code. Like there is such a thing as passive income. Mm-hmm. But what I meant when I said it originally was exactly that passive income doesn't exist in that I put in no money, I put in no time, I have no skills, and I just make money because of this brilliant strategy that somebody came up with. No, but I do own a bunch of businesses that I don't work in at all. And so do I get income checks that I don't work for? Sure. But it takes a lot of upfront work to get that passive income. Although in the stock market, you put the money in and passive income can happen. That is a literal tax bracket. So I totally agree with you.
In the same way that you're like, yeah, I'm collecting these checks, but you're not collecting those checks because of something you did just now. You had to put a lot of work in over the years. And it's the same way that it's like when you hire someone who can do it in 10 minutes, you're not paying for the 10 minutes. You're paying for the years of experience that allowed them to do it in 10 minutes.
That's so true. It's that like Pablo Picasso story. Okay, what I want to end on is, so all of these are incredible tactics. I always wonder, why do you think we have such emotional ties to money? Like you have people, I've seen it on the streets when I've hung out with you and we're walking here, somebody will walk up like, my rich BFF, give you a big hug, you're my favorite. And I think you probably also have a lot of the opposite, which is like, this will never work for me. I'll never be rich. I have no money. Like, what has been your experience? Why do we feel like money is so emotionally burdensome to us, or like some of us might never be able to get it?
Because in our society, money is a marker of success. And the way people treat me, I feel like oftentimes is a mirror of how they feel about their own abilities. And so when people are like, thank you so much for teaching me this thing, it's not that they're necessarily just like happy that I exist. They are happy that they have derived value and now see a light. That they're like, I'm going to follow this light. I'm going to make more money. I'm going to become more successful. And they see me as like almost like inspiration, I think, in that like, if I do these things, I too can make this kind of money. And I genuinely believe that if you are implementing the tips that I'm giving out in Well Endowed on social media, I will take you from a place where you previously were to somewhere better. Am I guaranteeing you the sun, the moon, and the stars? Not for everyone, but I promise you're going to end it better than you started. on the flip side, when people are like, this will never work, they're super defeatist, they're just like, woe is me, I think that is a projection of them feeling like they aren't deserving or that they've never seen an accurate representation of someone that looks like them succeed. If I'm honest, I think I probably had that mentality for a very long time. Prior to probably meeting my mentor at my first job at JP Morgan, she was the first rich Asian woman I had ever met. And I mean rich, like new Chanel bag every day, click-clacked in on the marble floors with the Gucci stilettos. I thought that was wealth. And I've learned over time that she is incredibly wealthy for a lot of other things other than her fashion collection. But seeing her succeed was the first time I could envision myself in that lived reality. Because the only rich people I had met up until that point were all white guys. And I say that lovingly. My husband is a white guy. But it was very hard to picture me in it until I saw it myself.
So true. Actually, you know what? My first rich mentor that was a woman was an Asian woman, Yang Butler.
Really?
Total shout out. Yeah, Filipino. And same thing. I remember when she told me when she moved, I was at State Street at the time. She's like, when I moved from San Francisco to, Boston, she's like, it's really hard, a lot of stuff that I had to move. She's like, the toughest part was like getting the semi-truck outfitted for the wine collection because it had, I remember thinking, bitch got a wine collection?
Yeah.
I thought it came in a box, I just didn't even, but I loved watching her live her version of a rich life. And she was the same. She had lovely bags. She was like beautifully sort of dressed. And I think she went to Harvard or MIT. I can't remember which one. So she had like all the trappings, but she was first gen. And I got to watch her and learn from her. And she was the very first one that talked to me about investing my own money and like getting up on the balcony and sort of seeing things from up high as opposed to being in the mix.
And I'm willing to bet that she probably at some point was generous to you in a way that no one else in your life had been in the past.
Oh, yeah.
I went over to my mentor's apartment one weekend. She was cleaning out her closet. She had a pair of YSL heels with a gold toe. And they were black heels, gold toe, very classic, beautiful. And I don't know why she had never worn these shoes. I think they might have been just a smidge too big for her or whatever. They weren't the right size, but she forgot to return them. Forgot to return a pair of $800 shoes. And she gave them to me. And that was my first real designer thing. Yeah. This was before I could buy my own. Like, those shoes allowed me to close my eyes and imagine.
It's so, and I think, for the people who follow you and the people who are listening, I think there's always two buckets. The person who's listening that needs to implement all this in their life and that hungrily wants their first pair of YSL. But there's also probably the person listening that already has all of this. And it's like the impact you can have on one young Vivian or Cody or whoever by being rich and showing that it's not always a bad thing, by being giving when you have it and sharing not just the stuff, but the knowledge is so beautiful. So truly, I think your movement is so important. I love following you on the internet. I've already told you that. I'm so excited for this book. I haven't gotten to read this one yet because it's brand new, but I read your last book and I'm just so glad you're here. And if you don't already follow Vivian on the internet, my rich BFF on all the social channels.
Your rich BFF.
Oh, she's mine.
Well, yeah.
It's mine, not yours. And then Net Worth and Chill podcast, which I was just on, really, really liked. You also have an incredible episode on there on private equity, which was near and dear to my heart. Yeah. So thank you for being here, Vivian. This is amazing.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Yay.
We are sitting on a generational wealth creation event. If you're here, this means you're a builder. As we're going through these next 3 days, I want you to know that the American dream starts with you guys by our little Main Street revolution.
And then I just want to give you guys permission to take a leap of faith.
If I knew then what I know now, I would probably do bigger deals.
It's given us an extra layer of security that we never would have had.
I am so excited to introduce you to some ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
We have to really take the time to make a meaningful connection. It's the fact that there is a lack of connection and the person just wants to be seen, heard, and understood.
Thanks for taking the question.
Are there extra things that need to be done when trying to paying off bad debt?
Great question.
I buy businesses so simple, even your grandmother understands them. That's the game.
It's you and me versus the problem. We're going to try to solve this together.
I know how to build trust in a very advanced way.
How does buying a business fit into the vision for your life?
Today, my goal is to teach you some fundamental skills that you can use to accelerate your business.
If you make a promise in the mirror, know that your word is freaking iron to you.
These people on Wall Street, they want to keep the normal people out of the game.
Main Street millionaires are all around this world, and it starts with each and every one of you.
What are you waiting for? Your path to ownership starts now. Get your ticket to join us on Main Street. Join us today.